promise, I solemnly swear not to scuff this too.
Hello, we're live.
Oh, are we? Oh,
We are live. Yeah, I got a little bit of that in.
Surprise.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to it's finally here. ZLTAC 2023 review streams. It feels like it was ages ago. And it kind of was. But I'm sorry we didn't get this out sooner. But obviously, there was a few things we were kind of hashing out between the for the ZLTAC LSA collaboration thing. So we wanted to do this right. Wanted to make everything look cool, look awesome. So sorry for the delay, everyone, but hopefully the delay will be worth it. So joining me today, I have Mr. Four Eyes from New Zealand. How's it going?
yeah, g'day, mate. There's it going.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Welcome back to another review. You did the 2022 review stream with us, if I'm not mistaken, with LSA?
Yeah. I was playing on spare parts that year. Yeah, it was cool. Thanks for having me back. I don't know why you do, but
oh, because you just did such an awesome job. We just did such an awesome job. Also joined by Nickel from Canberra. How's it going, mate?
Good. I'm under the weather at the moment, so everyone can giggle at my slightly nasally voice as I struggle to breathe through my nose. And if I mute myself, I apologize. It's because I'm trying to blow my nose so I can actually continue to talk without passing out. Apart from that, I'm good.
That helps. It is a long stream, so you will need to get as much oxygen in there as you can. And as entertaining as you passing out on stream would be, let's not do that. Anyway, cool. Obviously, got an eye in the chat. Let us know how the audio levels are. If someone's like really loud, or someone's really quiet, or the music's really loud, or you can't hear the music at all, or whatever. Let us know in the chat, and we can fix that up right away. But yeah. I don't know. Have you guys got anything you want to say before we jump right into it? Obviously, we've got 10 teams, and it's going to be a long one as it is. But you got anything you want to say?
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna have some fun.
I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, I've come back after quite a long time, so this is going to be interesting for me because I was quite busy at Nationals as well. So actually having a moment to sit and re-look at those teams is going to be an interesting one and a bit of introspection for my team and myself, I suspect. And we're going to start with that one, I think, can't we?
Yeah, we are going to start with that. So, right into it. Our 30th place team from ZLTAC 2023. Let's see if I figure this out. Transition back to here. Oh, I've messed up my timing. Bear with me, everyone. This is new technology to me.
Yeah, one job, bro. One job.
Whoa, seamless. How good. Cool. So, you'll notice what we're looking at is the what do you call it? The thing.
I guess it's the progression.
This is the thing that's been getting produced for the last few tournaments, where like the team ladder's got all the like woo throughout the course of the tournament, and Wham Fox is like that, and Wham Fox has made it look really pretty and cool and nice and fun with colors and stuff. So, Nickel, it's only fitting that you start us off. So, tell us a little bit about the Canberra Falcons and what your journey was like over the course of the tournament.
Honestly, it was a gut reaction out of this was on paper, and apparently everyone else thought it, that we shouldn't have come last and perhaps shouldn't have struggled as much as we did. Reality was somewhat different, and yeah, we ended up just having a bit of a rough time. Both our round robin was rough, which kind of put us in that sort of like behind the eight ball come cascades. And while we seemed to climb a little bit, we obviously climbed one spot, as you can see in Cascade 1. We didn't continue that into Cascade 2, which obviously put us in the position where we were at the end, which was rough. It really was. And for a lot of the tournament, there wasn't an obvious component as to why it was happening. And that was actually something that was really interesting as a team, was having to try and analyze that on the fly. And we obviously didn't do a great job of it. I didn't do a great job of it. I was captaining that team, so it's on me a little bit there. But And we're going to see it when we go to the next slide, I suspect, where we start to see some of the points break down, and you can start to identify like where we're struggling. So I suspect it was just a combination of little things. There's a bit of inexperience in the team. There was quite a, like, in the sense, there was a couple of new players. There was a couple of different combinations that had never been there before. And I think we're going to see that with a couple of the other teams in this lower bracket as well, where they're either new or a combination of new and old players, or in the case of spare parts teams, where you just never play with each other because you're drawn together.
Yeah, that was the most spare parts team ever. Like everyone was pick players from all over the bloody shop. So,
and amazing for them for not taking that wooden spoon. So we were clearly jealous. We wanted it rather than them. But I do think there was quite a few of these little components. I think we're going to see a few repeated problems or like hurdles, difficulties that my team experienced that we're going to see through this bottom bracket to varying degrees. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can jump over to this screen here at the stats. Can you speak a little bit to maybe like strategically what your team tried to pull off in the Hobart Arena and like, you know, the things that went well with it and the things that didn't go so well with it specifically?
So I think the big one is, and we kind of knew this going in, what we lack in this team is base breaking ability. And I don't think we tried enough different things through the competition. It was predicted that naturally that myself and that guy with a bit more experience behind us were going to be the natural sort of point scoring players there, with Gigantor, not quite an unknown, but having moved across from Western Australia, he was a little bit more of a wild card which way he was going to go. And obviously he ended up doing, not far behind either one of us. So that played out. But what I think we didn't do is we didn't, I guess, utilize combinations of players early enough, because towards the back end, we ended up sort of pairing that guy with Cornetto up, and they were breaking bases actually arguably easier than almost any other combination. We did also have to try and keep that guy and myself, so Jimmy and myself, separated because of the calling potential across both of us, and try to split that confidence in calling across the team. And we may have kind of shot ourselves in the foot there by removing arguably the strongest pair of players we could have put out to attack to get those points and to push those bases early. And you actually see it in the scoreline there, where like only one of us actually got an average of one base a game, which is pretty bad. And it's telling to where this fell down. We didn't do too badly in defense. We did quite good. You can see we got, most of us got, there's three of us got almost one deny a game and things like that. And that's probably telling. I think that they're not picking those partnerships up fast enough during the early part and suffering for it later. So there's.
Do you guys have much opportunity to train as a full squad beforehand in in drills and team games and stuff?
So we don't. Well, we do now. This is something that wouldn't have known unless you've come to Canberra. But Canberra's scene, like the nationals and the league scene, was about 12 to 15 players. And I don't know if either of you guys come from sites that have smaller player bases. Four Eyes is nodding here, and maybe you can sort of back me up here. We had a player base when I took over the site, basically at the end of last year, of about 12 to 15, which means you really, really struggle. Because you can't have Nats teams together because you need to encourage new players.
Yeah.
But as we got to nationals, our community had got to a point where we were running about 22 to 30 players at like the peak, but average of between 20 and 25. And I'm hoping we'll see that now, because that gives us more opportunity to play as a full squad. And I'm hoping you'll see that next year, as it will probably take a very similar squad. We've obviously going to lose a couple, I suspect. Gigantor moved back to Western Australia, for instance. So,
oh, really? That was a quick
Oh.
visit.
Yeah, I reckon, hey.
He got
far
one
out.
wooden spoon and he was like, "I'm out. I'm going back."
Look, I'm just going to come in with a side note. You know damn well
Yeah.
Gigantor's not that height in those player cards there. He's if it was like as per height, you'd just see his chest.
That's very true. Like I think we all stood on boxes.
That checks out.
Pain in the
but
ass
yeah,
to shoot too. Like you come around a corner with your gun a certain height, and you just be like, "Oh, okay, yep, all
There he
right."
is.
He's a big guy, and it is, and he can use it to his advantage a lot of the time. That reach there, and we'll see it with a few other players, I suspect. And he played really quite well on it. I think the team cohesion was our biggest, one of the other big ticket items early on.
Yeah.
And while we got towards it by the end of it, like a lot of teams do, too little, too late, perhaps. So.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something for players that come from sites that do have the privilege of being able to play with, like, you know, whether your preference is training with team games or training in just in AVDs and stuff, but being able to do it in a full Nats, like whether it's your full Nats team or even just the opportunity to train, you know, maybe your team's two-person attack versus this team's three-person defense. It's one of the best ways of basically just like really sharpening up all of your fundamentals and everything and figuring out the things you were talking about before, Nickel, like, oh, okay, these combinations of people work really well. These ones, not so much. Obviously, when you don't have the opportunity to do that in training beforehand, you have to use round robin and, you know, going into Cascade 1 or 2, potentially figuring that out, which just means you're behind the ball on figuring out all the other stuff, like the new arena, and this year as well, like a new system as well. So like a lot of the attention gets taken away from those to just developing those like fundamental things. So yeah, you know, hopefully with what you were saying about your site's numbers, that Canberra will be able to go back to being able to do those really high intensity, lots of reps of just attacking a base in whatever combinations you want, so you guys can avoid having to use the early stages of the comp to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was a unique competition, quite a different maze, new system to do that on. So and I do wonder how much we look at these teams and the ones we're going to look at next, the ones that, how many players do have experience on the new system and things like that. So I think it's going to be interesting as we move through.
Who had been to a Hobart pre-nuts?
Oh, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm pretty sure Angel had. I'm pretty sure.
I remember seeing her.
Cornetto, that guy, and maybe Giganto. They all had done it, but it was like once. I hope I got that right. Someone's going to Giganto and Angel only. There you go. Someone in the chat. Finn, thank you, Finn. I've got the Twitch chat up on one side so they can all keep me honest. So yeah, Gigantor and Angel only, which means not only do you need your callers needing to learn the base for the first time, but you're also getting them on H2 packs for the first time. So
yeah, no, it was, I think, a lot of teams, you know, it rose and fell depending on how much time they were able to get on the H2 packs before this tournament, right? It's just one of those compounding things. Like, it's enough to go to like a tournament, like a new tournament for the first time, and this one kind of played different as well with like the elevator in the middle, and then you add also new system, and it's just like, oh my god, too much.
It can be pretty overwhelming for some people too, like especially if you don't get any experience on a new system and then you get just thrown into the deep end and you either kind of just sink or swim. But a lot of people did really well, and then everyone else was just picking it up as the competition went on, and that's that, you know. But everyone has the experience now, and then moving forward, everyone's just going to be better and better.
Yeah. Well, no, you go, Nicole.
Go. Oh no! I was gonna say we're gonna say it again. So I wasn't gonna take any more for this team, but we're gonna see that, I think, because one of the fascinating things is just how competitive the bottom third of this competition was. Like, just the players in it, and I think that's something we're going to come back to, or I'm going to come back to, because that's something that when I left in 2016, you always had a bottom few teams that were almost inherently not competitive. That doesn't feel like it exists anymore, and I think that's great for the sport. but it makes it hard coming back.
Yeah, it's a rough adjustment, huh?
Yeah.
Well, so before we move on to our next team, we'll just cover. I want you to cover two more things for your team. Nico, and maybe you can jump in as well, Four Eyes. Who was your standout player for the Falcons? And you can say yourself if you like, but you might look like a bit of a knob.
Go on, you won't.
I won't actually. I think the standout player, like, I really want to say Angel, but actually Cornetto.
I'll agree with that.
Like,
And
Angel
Cornetto
was,
as well, yeah.
Yeah, Angel performed particularly well. Like, really, like, especially, I've got some cool statistic for her. She's on the statistics of our board quite a lot. But Cornetto's ability to break bases with Jimmy, power couple that they are, because, but that is actually, for me, was the standout.
Yep, Four Eyes, you echo that notion?
Yeah. Oh, from the few times that we played you guys, I'd agree with that. And Gigantor, his comms were really good too. Like, he was always floating around outside the base whenever I ran into him, or he ran over me. But it was really good for him to keep those comms going and have everyone just like backing him up. And it was just really fun to play against you guys. It was great.
Yeah, cool. Well, excellent work by Angel, Cornetto, and Gigantor, dropping some names from the boys. I guess before we move on, I have a quick question. Is this team in some variation going to be coming back next year, or will it be completely different, do you reckon, Nickel?
All going well, we'll see a good chunk of this team coming back. We have, as I said, a growing seed, which means we're going to see a couple. I suspect we'll see a couple of swap outs.
Yep.
But I suspect the core of this team will come back next year.
Excellent. And so, you can chip in as well, Four Eyes, but what points of improvement will you be looking to ensure you improve your result next year?
I think Nickel, bro, you nailed it on the head there. Just practicing those base cracks, and there was a couple of times, I think, from memory, there was just a little bit of confusion as to who had what and who needed what and how many people had your base and stuff like that. It's just those minor details like that comes with experience. So, like, just the more practice you do, then you guys will be handing the wooden spoon over to somebody else next year for sure.
Yeah, and that's I think part of the goal is there's a pretty big drive to be able to do that next year. So I think that base cracking those bases is going to be key to that, and breaking that apart as a team and rebuilding it. Well,
yeah. Well, I did a bit of a blog post recently on the Laser Sports Academy socials about upskilling after a tournament. I'm just talking a bit about how I feel like the best time to upskill in terms of like learning new things, like developing new skills, or leveling out your game, like bringing up the things you're just not very good at yet, or even just like the things you think you're strong at, you like figure out the stuff at a tournament, like, oh, I could be doing this better. After a tournament is like the best time to be working on that stuff, because one, it's fresh in your mind. Two, it's probably fresh that like you've got the emotions of like, oh, I'm like really bummed I got whatever result. There's your motivation, your fuel. And then also the reality is, like, in the trainings right after a tournament, like, you're not training for a tournament, so the pressure isn't on to like, okay, I need to be like really switched, I need to be doing really well, you know what I mean? That like the pressure's off, you can kind of free yourself to make mistakes, learn new things. And so I'm sure with what you were saying about your scene and stuff, you guys will make the most of your trainings leading into the next tournament. Anything else we'd like to say for Canberra Falcons before we move on?
Yeah, move on. We'll take on too much time.
Okay.
I love my boys and girls, but we've got 9 other teams to do. And we can always relate back to the other teams through it. I'm inevitably going to relate back some of the stuff to my team.
Yeah,
through the night.
Alrighty. Well, looking forward to seeing the Canberra Falcons back. But in 29th place, we had S. Boom. Back to this screen. Oh, that was a bit better, wasn't it? That was much better.
That's like you've
Cool.
done this before, mate.
I did some practice reps and then I decided to bugger it up on the first one. The pressure was on. I'm sweating, guys. But anyway, spare parts. Predicted 27th, finished 29th. The highest they were during the tournament was 25th, and they ended up having a bit of a drop in the last couple stages, finishing in 29th. So, who is talking about spare parts? I'm pulling it up. Four Ice. This is all
Yeah,
you,
I
bud.
think we argued over this one, didn't we? 4 eyes.
Yeah, man. Like, look, if you want to take the lead on this one, I'm more than happy. But I'll just say that I got a lot of love for like my spare parts team. Like, I was with them
Of
last
course,
year.
no. Jump in, mate, because you were on a team like this last year. So get your insights, and then I'll chip in. I've obviously got an old Canberra player on this team as well.
Yeah.
So you start. We'll balance off each other for this one. I think this is a good one to do this.
Oh, easy, man. Well, they obviously subbed me out for Ninja, so obviously an upgrade right there. But you know,
Come on, bro. Yeah, it's one of the you had a monster tournament last year.
Oh man, I was so crook last year. But yeah, no, the guys on that team did really well. Honestly, like just playing against Ness and guards and with them as well, it's just cruisy, you know, like they just, you don't really need to tell them what to do, or they don't really tell you what to do. They just obviously been playing for years, but they just know. And it's just like, okay, sweet. And when you go up against them, and especially with Ninja on the team as well, like that monster pack pointer, you just kind of expect a bit of a tough time trying to get around them and stuff like that, because, you know, literally throwing a spanner into the works, excuse the pun, but
nice.
Yeah, no, it was it was a good time playing against them. Yeah, I don't really have much negative things to say about them, obviously, other than the fact that everyone's from different parts of the country, and it's just that cohesion coming again and going from there. But as far as it goes, like, it was pretty well done from them, obviously with a little bit of a drop in there, due to whatever reason. They know they can do a lot better, and I'm pretty sure, depending on whoever's on the team next year, if they continue to carry on the tradition, it'll be better.
It'll be some other absolute monster player taking the lead. It'll be ridiculous.
I think it's I think it's a team. Specifically this one as well has a lot of years of experience on it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether or not, between that, a little bit of home site experience with Marcus, we see like that really comes to the fore in their early games and their round robin Cascade 1, right? I wonder if that's what we're seeing with this, and but they're not taking anything away from them. But I do. It's got a lot of experience compared to some spare parts teams, which are all can be sometimes full of newer players.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, and I think it does. There was obviously some home side advantage factor with Skull One, obviously residing in Hobart now, but also I'm pretty sure we scroll to the next screen. I know Ninja went to at least one pre-nats. Celtic might not have gone to any. Does anyone in the chat know if Striker, Ness, and Guardian had gone to any of the pre-nats? Let us know. I can't quite remember, but yeah, it's again just kind of speaking to, you know, maybe that little bit of like home advantage was what helped them get past that wooden spoon game. Obviously, like there's a bajillion other factors, but that's one of the like little 1%ers that they maybe had over you. With you know, Ninja being able to attend a pre-nuts or two, and a little bit of also tips and tricks from the old Skull One.
I think like getting that slight faster head around the maze with someone who's already been playing there. But like Ninja Take brings a power player that is just like, I'd like to say that I can get back to what Ninja was this year. I can get back to that sort of level, but I'm not there yet. I'm still picking myself back up. But that score, right? And you also see a little bit more consistency with their back four. And I think that's going to be an interesting one where we see teams that have a pretty consistent scoreline with like one power player, but where we see scores that are the teams that have got some outliers on either end, for instance, are going to struggle a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, in terms of things that this team did really well, strategically or in like the way they're attacked or defended, what did you guys see from spare parts they did really well?
Oh, for me, guards. Okay, this is side note here. I came up to spare parts base in one of the games, and guards was defending it, and like him and I just started cracking jokes with each other, and it was just real terrible dad jokes, and I completely forgot that I needed the base, so I left. So,
Nice.
so if you can use that as a strategy, then sure, why not? But
Excellent.
I think to double that point though, like to sort of carry on that. I mean, jokes aside, they don't break.
Mm.
yeah,
I don't think I mean, they might get a little bit flustered every now and then, but they don't break. And I don't think they, and, you know, chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I don't think I could see them angry at each other in or out of the base. And that's something that means
yeah,
your
true.
consistency with games is going to improve with that.
Yeah, I think when I was talking to Ninja during the tournament, he was saying that he was really happy with how like they haven't had any big, you know, usually there's always like, you know, you might have like one player that's like always complaining about something and always a negative Nancy, you know, it's like, oh, get over it, bro. Or,
Yeah.
you know, you might just have someone that's like the hothead on the team, you know, whatever it is. Or you might just have some team-wide arguments. But he was saying, for the most part, they were pretty chill, which is good. And obviously, when you're playing on a team of players from like all over the country, and your synergies aren't there, you're going to drop heaps of games. And if you don't have that kind of like that calm, that sense of like, you know, cool, you know, let's learn from our losses, let's move on, and you're just exploding at each other after every game, that's not only going to reflect on your performance, but it's also just going to be a really bad nationals for everyone, right? So
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
And I think they have this in spades. Their comms seem to be generally pretty good as well. That's something else I notice. You know, the guards and S comms in the back have always seemed good. Sometimes a little bit slower. You've got a number of people on the team that are just, you know, they're a little bit slower from a player perspective, and that probably let them down a little bit in some games. But you know, at that point, if we're trying to pick the things that they could do better, or where that's probably the only thing that jumps out. So,
Look, I'll chuck in a little bit here. Just quick shout out to Skull One. Like he was one of the guys that was just in places that I didn't expect it, and so I'd try and crack the base, and then I'd be getting shot from like this janky ass corner from somewhere, and it's just like, oh, cool, yep, excellent.
that's that
try
home
that
side
again.
advantage coming in hot, mate.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
it
try it
really is.
again, and he'd be in a different corner. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, fun.
Yeah. Well, on that topic of specific players, who for each of you was your standout player for the team? And you can pick more than one, I guess, but try and pick one, please. Come on.
I'm gonna go with
Look.
Ness.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Ness's defense and just comms and the fact that she's just always so chill. It's just like, it's a delight to play against and with as well, having been fortunate enough to play on a team with her last year. But she's just always so chill. She knows where to go and where to be. And sure, like her scores may not be super high, but the fact that she can contribute so much to the team otherwise, it's like she's definitely someone that stood out for me, like not only this year but last year as well.
Lovely job.
I think that's really fair. I was going to say Ninja, but that's just kind of proof that, you know, people who leave and are old can come back and play again. And I think that's really important for me to remember.
It's giving you hope, Nickel. It's giving you hope.
He's about 5 years younger than me, I'm pretty sure, actually. But, but it's nice seeing some of the older players come back through. And I think that's really important to see. And obviously, Guardian Ness have been in this tournament since I started. And it's awesome to see that. So, yeah, can't really argue with Four Eyes there. Ninja was my gut instinct just on the familiarity with an old hand.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like the easy pick, right? Just looking at the numbers as well. Ninja did train like a lot and hard for this tournament. It's like obviously when you're on a spare parts team, you're kind of not expecting to be able to do like super well realistically. But he was still training like a lot, every week, training hard, and it helped him sharpen up and stuff because Ninja's been away himself for like quite a while, so he's not back to prime Ninja that we've seen before, and kind of like that era where he was playing with the Beavers, I would say. But I think it was still a respectable performance.
Yeah, good on him though. Like just getting stuck into it, eh? So good on him.
Yeah. And just the motivation to like actually keep rocking up the training, even though you're playing on a team of people you've never played with before, and realistically like won't do as well as he's done before. Like he's come as high as like second place before, right? So it was good on him. Do we have obviously? I mean, we might have a version of a spare parts team, but like what that looks like will most likely be very different. Did we have any final message for the spare parts team before we move on?
Just hopefully you guys keep the name, the team name, if it carries on into the future. It could very well be a completely different team next year, so we'll see. But this one's kind of difficult to talk about in that aspect because it is a spare parts team. So but yeah, if you guys have anything else to contribute to that, then. Yeah,
I think the only thought is any team that picks up one of these players or a couple of them next year, this year shows that you've got a pretty consistent team there, and I think you should be happy to sort of pick up any of these players. Generally speaking, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, they don't have to be on a spare parts team. They can be home with a team from their state as well, right? So, fingers crossed. Obviously, it's been hard with COVID and stuff. We're still seeing like the after effects of that and how like the scenes are still struggling to recover, or at least some of them are. But yeah, I'd love to see all of these players on their own teams. If not, we'll have spare parts again. Hopefully, they keep the name. And we'll move on to our 28th place team. We have. Back, boom. That was a bit sloppy. I'll get better, guys. So, also just a quick note: the predicted thing in the top right, there. Very good. That's the LSA predictions. That's not the sinks list. I didn't think to include the sinks list. I might add that on the next one. But anyway, predicted 29th, finished 28th, so up one from their predictions. Very groovy.
Let's go.
They were another team that started off pretty strong in 25th, but as the tournament went, dropped 2. Stayed and then dropped one more after that. Cool. So who's talking about the tanks?
I think that was me.
I think that was Nickel.
Yeah.
Or you, bud.
Look, I think this is a really interesting one because we're going to see the few of these. Obviously, coming across from Western Australia, they've got this added complexity that their home sites aren't zone sites anymore. And I don't want to bang on about it, but that I guess the work taken in the first few days is almost compounded. That they have to get used to, the new system. In this case, a new system, and back to an older, like a PNC macros or a zone system. And I think they did phenomenally. So to begin with, but I wonder whether or not They had a couple of real power players from the statistics point of view as well. And I wonder whether or not, just through the comp as people started to catch up, whether or not they kind of rode that wave a little bit, but couldn't keep riding it through the cascades themselves. That was kind of the what I saw. But they were, again, a lovely team to play against and play with. I had lots of fun playing against them. And I think I played against them a lot over the course of the competition. So, yeah, really interesting. And I think when we see the stats on the next page as well, it's going to be interesting to sort of see a couple of those players being quite high. But and we talk about those sort of outliers and things like that, and the consistency through the tournament. For us, anything from? Did you play against them much?
Yeah, we played against them a few times. Yeah, just basically echoing what you'd say, to be honest. Again, awesome team to play against, especially Dorky. Gazza just doing Gazza things. And yeah, there was a couple of players that just kind of surprised me, not in like a bad way, but it's just like, obviously I don't know nothing about them, so I'm like, okay, just go in with an open mind, and especially playing against them, and then just getting absolutely wrecked, for lack of a better word, and then just going, well, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing. But yeah, they had some pretty good games in terms of strategy as well. I think they were just dumping to from memory. One of the games was they were dumping to one base, taking it, and then dumping to the other one.
Yeah.
And while it works, especially at the beginning, when the other teams catch on to what you're doing, it can kind of backfire potentially, but it worked well for what they were doing. And yeah, it was great to play against them.
Yeah, dump is one of those strategies that when, like, it's an inherently chaotic strategy, and so if the other teams kind of like fall into that chaos as well, that's when the dumps can very easily become like super effective, and then that's when you see them get 10 bases really quick and they just field pointing the whole game, because like if the whole game's fallen into chaos and no one's been able to address the dump properly. But obviously you only see a dump so many times, and you eventually figure out, okay, when this team dumps to us, we're going to do this. And when this team dumps to the other team first, we're going to do this. And this is what needs to happen. And then like finding that kind of building that structure to kind of navigate through the chaos of a dump is really important in not letting it just like take over a game. And did you say they were dumping like a lot of their games in the tournament, or they just did it every now and then?
I think it was every now and then from memory.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was definitely one game that we had against them. They would just leave, and we'd kind of be like, standing around like, oh, well, do we do something? Like, we should be doing something right now.
Like the John Travolta Pulp Fiction meme.
Yeah. It's interesting for it, right? Because it's one of those things that Dorky's obviously got quite a lot of experience, and I think he was really good to sort of bring some of that experience, because you got a couple of younger players in there. But these teams amongst this bottom 10, this includes mine, the ability to adapt to things like dumps is one of those things that you'll often find improves, and once you improve that, you find yourself climbing out of this bottom 10. So it's interesting to see the strategies being used, and seeing, especially if we see this team come back next year, to see how they go and what they learn from this. You just see here, though, like on the stats a little bit, that you had 3 people on this team consistently getting bases every game, at least based off the stats. And I suspect we're going to start seeing this more and more as we get through that top 10, that higher consistency there. And actually, using my team as an example, you've got a higher high in this one, but while the band, like the difference between the highest and lowest scores, average scores for these is large, they're both higher. So it's bringing up that average at the bottom end as well, which is so powerful for these teams. That consistency becomes like such a big part of of this competition.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing that you see with the that's a lot of times the difference between the lower end teams and the top end teams is the consistency.
Yeah.
Like how, in principle, players most of the time, obviously like the experience depending, but most of the time generally know this is the right thing to be doing right now. Or like this is the right way I should panel right now. And the difference is how often they're doing the right thing. The very, very top end teams, they're very, very rarely doing the wrong thing, right? And then the lower end teams, due to like a lack of experience or lack of cohesion, whatever it is, you'll find them, if you spoke to them about it after the game, they're like, oh, like I don't know why I did that, or like, oh, that felt really bad, But it's just that, like you said, like the consistency is everything, for sure.
I'd love to point out that this is an interesting. Again, I'm going to point to the stats because I mean that's kind of it's what I do generally speaking. But Gaza obviously played amazingly through the competition. Really, like power player. Fascinating to see that his average denies is the same. How often he gets denied is the same as how often he gets bases. But it's a really interesting one, right? Because it means he was going for them, and he did get denied a bunch, but he still came out with statistically quite a good set of like stats there, positive across the board. The only one there you don't want to be positive on technically, I think, is the D minus. But even with that, he's still there. So
you miss every shot you don't take. And I'm also curious if we could get a separate stat of the denials, the D minus, and how many of them were into blue base. That'll be very interesting. I would wager it's a very large percentage of them.
Oh,
yeah.
Just as a side note, the highest number of denies in a game amongst this team, I think, was 5 denies, like actually scoring denies, so that D plus. That came from Gaza in a game. It was 5 of them in one game. Got another statistical board off to the side here, sorry.
Okay, let's go.
Playing these. It's just there. But despite that, a fun fact for this team is VB Longneck actually, I believe, and I'm hoping I'm reading this right. So if George is watching this and he's like, Nick, you're reading this wrong. Sorry. But the highest tag ratio in a single game actually goes to VB Longneck with a 26-9. I imagine he was probably playing a fairly heavy defense in that game. But good on him.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Solid. That's a cheeky 26-9. That sounds like a door defender. That sounds like a door defender stat to me. And like maybe they didn't get attacked much, or maybe he was just like beast moding. But I mean, weren't getting attacked much. Was able to sit in their sniper positions.
Why not all three, bro?
Why not all three?
Why not all three?
No, that's awesome. But anyway. What do we feel that this team maybe didn't do so well, and something that they could try and improve on for next year?
You go for Eyes. I've got one, but you have a crack.
Okay. Look, it can kind of go both ways here. Like the one thing that they did do well is dump bouncing, but then also there was a couple of games where I'm pretty sure there was a little bit of chaos in there that confused them as well. So yeah, it's kind of tough to call that one, and I don't want to say that it didn't work for them, because obviously it screwed me up. But I'll just put a pause on that one, and I'll let you go, Nickel, and then I'll see if I can come back to it.
Yeah, look, I don't want this to come across as harsh, but there's 2 parts that jumped out at me from observing the games and now and looking at some of the stats. Is if the consistency across the teams is obviously quite good, but like dragging people through bases, there's looks like there's probably a little bit of work here to do with that, where you've got 3 of them clearly getting bases every game, but 3 of them not. We have 5 players in a team, which means that leaves at the moment 2 to 3 players each game that are clearly struggling to get bases. And my team has the same problem, being able to push specific individuals through bases. So that's possibly something to look at for the next year if they stick around together. I think the other one, and it's a little bit harder to tell, but it's anecdotal based off what I was seeing, is making sure that if a game goes a bit rough, not to let that overflow outside the game. And this is happens with all teams of all tiers. You get the best teams in the competition over the last 2 decades, and a number of them don't behave well outside of the maze with each other, but they're just really good inside the maze. But making that transition from in the game to out of the game and making sure that's smooth, like spare parts, for instance, this year, is really important, and almost as important as in the game at times. And that's something to think about, especially if you're going to take the same cohort of people for the next tournament. Keep working on that.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that a bit, and what both of you said is, I think, the idea of like rounding out the skill sets of your whole team. Obviously, if it's a newly formed team, you don't always have the opportunity to do that. But if it is a team that exists for multiple years together, I think a really good investment of time and training is playing people in positions they don't normally play, and just getting them heaps of reps and time there, so that when the time comes that they, maybe your team doesn't start in those positions, right? Your team starts in whatever your strongest positions are, because you want to have a good start, because if you're winning the game, it's easier to retain a lead than it is to be losing and climb back to a lead, right? But the issue is, if the team isn't well-rounded in its nature and like everyone being able to do everything, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a defender able to attack bases. Sometimes it could be an attacker that's really lousy on like a door, like their comms are not very good, right?
Wow,
not
call
saying
me
this
out, then.
not saying that's the case for any of these players in particular, but just as an example, you can start off strong, but then you'll see some teams like their worm goes like this, and then their strongest combination is over, and they go like, and they just absolutely flatline, and then the teams are able to catch up. So I think if the team does stick together, that'd be a very good investment of time and training, is rounding out the skill sets of everyone on the team and giving everyone lots of time and reps to do the positions they don't normally do, because you might not start there, but you probably will end up there at some point. Especially if the game starts off going well, right? The better the game is going, the more likely that people are going to end up in different positions, right? It's going to, if everyone's in the exact same positions at the start of the game versus the end of the game, it probably wasn't a good game, right? But
I cannot agree with that more, and my team is absolutely guilty of it. We've had games where literally we had an unusual combination of people go out, and 7 minutes later, nothing had happened. Like it's rough. It really is. So, yeah.
And I think one last thing I would like to touch on is, like you were saying, the transition between out of game to like in the game versus out of the game. Obviously, everyone can get heated in the games, and that's because we're passionate and because we obviously are invested and we care about this thing. But the transition outside needs to change, and I think I like sometimes people just forget they're like, that these guys are like your friends, right? You wouldn't normally talk to your friends like this, so maybe like
I hate these people.
Maybe don't talk to them like that. I don't know. But it does, like, outside of just like potentially ruining relationships and then ruining synergies in games and stuff, because like, I don't really want to play with that person because whatever. It also means, obviously, the old mantra everyone repeats, you learn from your losses, right? But you only learn from your losses if you actually make a conscious effort to reflect on them as a team and go, these were the things that went wrong, these are the things we need to do to try and fix that, or here's some things we can try to do. If everyone just explodes at each other out like as soon as the game's over, like you're probably not going to have a very constructive conversation about what actually went wrong, and then you're just probably going to make that same mistake again. So really,
fair.
I didn't personally see this from that team, so I'm not saying ZLTAC were like the worst for it ever in the world, but just on the note that Nickel was saying, because at the end of the day, LSA is all about helping people get better at laser tag. Right?
Oh, cheeky plug. Go on.
Anyway, I don't know what I just did. I don't know why I did that. I was just excited. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, just before, and just you carry on again. Just on the end of that, there. Just try not to let yourself get overwhelmed with like the game that you've just played. look, it
Yeah.
happened. Just do your best to try and figure out a way to, okay, that happened. Sweet, put it in the past. Talk about it if you want to. Don't talk about it if you want to. But you kind of got to just leave it behind and go into the next game with a fresh mindset and just carry on. Unfortunately, but
it's a big piece of, especially if you end up wanting to captain a team. You need to be able to learn when and where to talk to your players and how to teach them how to do that as well. The old adage, walk away if you've got a problem with the last game, take a game off, come back and have a chat to your captain about it a game later. Gives you a bit of time. I just wanted to point out, because where I've got the chat from it, someone's asked if the tag ratio that we were talking about for VD Longneck is the highest amongst these bottom 10 teams. It is, but there is one other player that also has exactly the same tag ratio with a completely different number of tags though. So I'll let people take a guess at that, and I will point it out when we get to that team.
That's fun. That's cool.
Oh, mini game.
Thanks, Nickel. Well, before we move on from WA Tanks, who was your standout player / but preferably one singular for WA Tanks?
I love Dorky, and it's been lovely going to see it again, but it's hard to go past Gaza just how well he played.
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, he was everywhere. He was defending, he was attacking. I commentated games where he was in both places at once, it seems.
Cheating.
It's hard to go past that. He's got a clone.
Yeah, no, I think Gaza, ever since his, I'm pretty sure his ZLTAC debut was in 2017 with Ninja, actually, on a WA team. I can't remember what they were called, but they had their whole theme was the bloody...
Bromigos?
Bromigos, yes.
Yeah. Oh.
Anyway, ever since
shirts.
then, his debut, he's always been a pretty, I remember in 2017, people were like, oh, this Gaza dude's pretty good at laser tag. And that hasn't changed. But For Eyes, who's your pick?
Look, okay, again, shout out to Dorky, but also I want to, and the chat can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a group of us that went out halfway through the competition to Korean barbecue, and VB Longneck just decided to cover the entire bill. And I was like, who is this guy? And what do I owe you? Yeah, shout out to him. But in terms of in-game, I'm going to go with Noobs. Noobs 316. He surprised me a lot. He was always where he should have been, especially when it comes to attacking their base. He was one of the guys that I always saw there, and his comms between his other teammates were really on top as well. So shout out to him. But yeah, I'll go with Noobs for my standout player for that team.
Cool.
Not to discredit anyone else, of course, but
yeah, obviously. Well, yeah, cool. Phoebe Longneck, if you want to, I don't know, come hang out for dinner sometime, go to a 5-star restaurant. I'd love to talk to you about laser tag. Anyway, do we have anything else we'd like to talk about with the WO Tanks before we move on?
Hopefully we see them again next year, because I think they can only go up from here.
It'd be really cool to see them come next year, and I'd be interested to see whether or not they change, whether or not they tweak the team.
Best of luck to the WA Tanks players. Hope to see everyone back, whether it's the same, some other variation, whatever it is. Keep playing laser tags. Laser tags cool and fun and nice. Anyway, now I'm going to try this transition. I've been doing a transition thing where the player cards come up, but apparently all of our audio, I think the music stays, but our audio just disappears. So chat, let us know if it works this time. But in 27th place, we have Void. We had Mum, Carton, Queenie, Ems, Tomo, and Stingers. And transition back. How was that, everyone? Could you still hear me? You let me know.
I mean, I could.
Yeah, well, you can hear me. Nailed it. I nailed it. Awesome. Fantastic. Who's talking about Void? I believe that was also Nickel. Nickel's back.
It was me again. So Void was a really fascinating team, and lovely humans. might I add. Like, they were just a lovely team. I did have to apologize to one of them particularly because I felt like I was very mean to them. I think it was M's in one of the games, maybe, where I denied them
How
like
dare
6
you.
times, like
How
in a row.
dare you?
But Void's a fascinating one because their end, like unlike a lot of the teams we've looked at so far who have kind of dropped, they had a pretty decent start. Interestingly, never hitting their predicted amount, predicted position, which I think we should talk about at some point because it'd be interesting. Like, this is one of those teams where it's got quite a few young people, younger players in it. But maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe these players have been around for a little bit longer, and I've just missed them. But they never quite hit the predicted 25th that they're going for. But they had a good start, and they kind of dropped it on Cascades too, obviously, as we can see on the chart. But they had a great climb through the back half of the competition, which would suggest that they were learning and improving their game through the competition. Something that we've seen some of these teams so far struggle with. And we're going to see it in a couple of the other teams where they've had fairly dramatic drops. This has been a nice little consistent rise all the way out to 27th, obviously. Again, not quite hitting that 25th, but I think a very, very respectable little run through Cascade 2 and Ascensions. So, yeah, really good to see. And a fascinating team to watch on the outside as well, because they seem very chill but quite new. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we'll
Chat
move to the player cards
for
in a
us.
sec. We'll move to the player cards now, but I think I always say, to my something's going on. That's not me? That's someone else. Anyway.
Oh, there might have. I live on the main road to the hospital, so if you hear sirens, it's
that checks
a
out. That checks
casual
out.
occurrence.
Okay, cool. Anyway, I always say to players at tournaments, maybe they had a rough game, whatever, and they're like, oh, like we're not doing very well at the moment. But I always say to them, literally, the only day where the results matter like significantly is the last day, and then the whole lead up to that, all that matters is what teams learn the most. And if you're the team that learns the most, by the time you get to the end of the tournament, you're going to be winning games, right? And then this is an example where by Cascade 2, this team had obviously been working on stuff, learned a lot, and they were able to make a climb by a few positions into the last day. So anyway, that's just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to scroll on the wrong screen. Boom. You'll notice, so Jipley was on this team as well, but she missed the photos. So we have invisible Gypsy.
That almost sounds like an insult.
I was going to say, I think you got to be careful about Jipley rather than Gypsy because I don't want to get done too badly for this.
I'm on a first name basis with everyone. No. Anyway, that's my bad. So what were we talking about? We were talking about new players. Yeah. So Carton, obviously, Stingers has been around the block. Carton's played a few nationals. Ems was a first year ZLTAC player. Tomo was a first year ZLTAC player, but Queenie, Mum, and Jipley, oh my goodness, Jipley have all been to plenty of ZLTAC tournaments. So it was only Ems and Tomo that were actually the rookie newbies.
Okay. Clearly, yeah. This is showing off my lack of knowledge of players when I disappeared for obviously a little bit of time. But it was a really good team to watch. And as I said, we played them quite a few times through it. And interestingly, it was one of the teams that we thought we beat them more often than not until it was important, in which case I think we got smashed by them. But they seemed consistent. But they must have been learning things because they were taking games where there was. I remember quite specifically that they were taking games out of people that no one thought they should be able to. And I think that's really interesting, is being able to pull those wins out of the bag, and just you get those points where people would arguably say, well, you shouldn't have them, you shouldn't get them, they're not a threat. And they seem to be able to do that quite a few times through the tournament. And kudos to them for it. I think that's really, really cool. Really interesting, obviously, having a team of 7 as well. This is a
Oh,
So,
sorry, I just learned how to count.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 7 there.
First of our seven people teams.
yeah. So this is even more impressive that we see them learning through the competition, right? Because they, statistically speaking, a couple of these players wouldn't have played as many games. And oftentimes, there's the argument to be made that you take a team of 5 because you play as many games as possible, and that's great. But obviously, you're susceptible to injury. Like I've taken 5-player teams to nationals, and I've taken 6-player teams to nationals. I'll never do a 5-player team again, but there are arguments. But very few people will take a team of 7 because you do start to dilute the amount of time in the maze if you do it evenly. If, of course, you stack a couple of players into most games and you rotate that bottom four or bottom 5, then that's one way to do it. But that takes a special type of like team cohesion to do that. So kudos to these guys for doing that. And
I think
seemingly
Simi has
coming
pointed out
through.
that Gypsy. Oh, I've done it 3 times. I've done it thrice. Jip Lee was only there for part of the tournament, so it was technically like a six-player team.
Okay, there you go. Arrived late and left early. Okay, there you go. Okay, not a problem. Sorry, but even then, it's still a feat, and I just want to call that out as something slightly unusual. The other thing we see here is a couple of really like you got a lot of consistency in, from a tag ratio perspective as well, and also your score ratio through that top 4, all at the 90 or above. So that's puts them in a really good stead for a large chunk of the tournament. So
yeah, I think there's something different about this team versus the last few teams. It's rather than it being that 1 or maybe 2 players that are kind of getting the bulk load of the numbers. This has been very much distributed between those top 4.
yeah,
and again, we were talking a lot about consistency, well-roundedness. Here's an example of that in action. So
yeah, and it is. And for those playing at home, Carlton got a 271% tag ratio in one of his games, not the 289 that we saw in the last team, but also very, very good. And Carlton played exceptionally well in a lot of these games as well. So really good to see. I again, with no kind of didn't know who these players were. Most of these players were. It was interesting coming to play against the team and going, I have no idea who you guys are. I have no idea who I should be afraid of, or if I should be afraid of you.
Yeah. I mean, what was the last Nets you attended? Was it 2016?
2016. Yeah. It's sorry. I was at last year's Nationals for the back half of it.
Yeah.
Joining in the Falcons then. Hence why I've got technically 2 wooden spoons now. Because I was technically on the team. So I do think though this is a really interesting one, right? Because this is a team that comes. This is the first team. I think one of the few teams we've got down here that are covering Queensland, and Queensland's scene is obviously significantly bigger than most places in Australia. I'm not going to say all. I was technically on the team. I was on the scorecards, things like that. Sorry, that chat's gonna. Yeah. You just were. I was just on the team.
Thanks for sorting.
I own it.
I wanted to say.
Fit is calling me out for this, which is fair enough. I was on the team. I have 2 wooden spoons. It's more than you. Go away. But what I was saying before, because this comes from Queensland, this is a squad that obviously has the benefit of a large scene, and I can't speak for whether or not they play together at back in Queensland, but it gives our newer players here. Ems is a really good example. If this is the first time for Ems as a player, they did incredibly. And I do wonder how much of this comes from having an inherently competitive and large scene back home, which means you have a leg up on those that have a smaller scene.
Yeah, and I think also just like being able to train against, like 4-time ZLTAC champion players and, all of these other crazy good players that's obviously going to be pretty helpful in sharp, as we were talking before about, like, obviously it's good to be able to train with your team, but if you're then able to train against some of the best players in the country or in the world, that's cool. That's good. And I think that's reflected in, like, when we see these rookies come out of Queensland, like there's like a rookie, and then there's like the Queensland rookies. They're just usually, or pretty much always, at like a caliber above what you might expect of a rookie, just because of like the types of players that they're exposed to at home, which is it's awesome. It's very, very groovy.
How about you, Four Eyes? What did you find playing against this team?
Well, from what I can remember, one of the main things that sticks out to me is just confusing the hell out of Mum with my comms and Lycan's comms. We'd just go into this like real casual Kiwi as like, bro, you good? Yeah, bro. You wanna bounce? Yeah. So it'd just be like, bro, this, bro, that. And I remember Mum came up to us after one of the games and she's like, how do you guys like do that? And we're just like, I don't know. But yeah, but obviously playing against these guys, Stingers with the years of experience of like all over the competition, it was definitely a team that, I didn't want to underestimate, because not only them being a Queensland team, but with people on the team such as like Stingers and Carton and Jips when she was there as well, and the experience from Mum and Queenie, it was just not to be underestimated. So I kind of just, for me going into it, I kind of just played it pretty cautiously, to be honest, because if you were to turn your back on them, I'd say you'd probably get slapped around a little bit for doing so.
I think something that's usually pretty consistent with the Queensland teams is you kind of need to play it. You can't be making mistakes, right? I think Queensland in general are pretty good at capitalizing on mistakes and strategic decisions that other teams make. So yeah, I can totally see that being a thing.
They have the experience. So I was going to say, they have the experience of playing against so many different types of teams that we see coming out of Queensland, which means you get the benefit of having to deal with those and having to learn how to react to them. When you play against the same teams, even if you've got 3 really good quality teams out of a site, you've only got those 2 other teams to play against, which means you get used to them. Queensland's production of teams and obviously the multiple sites within relative close proximity gives them a fairly unique advantage in the production of teams and learning off each other from that perspective. To the point of like the experience of players, I just want to point out again, I'm going to do statistics for a moment. Mum's statistics on denies being the only 1 point ratio there. So on average, getting a deny every game, and that comes a little bit from defense, obviously, but it's still a very good average score for a defending player. But most denies on this team in a single game was 7 denies in a single game, and that came from Mum. So,
I wonder how many of those denials were phaser shots. Probably a lot of them.
Maybe
at blue base.
And blue base. The compounding factors. Maybe Mum just figured out how to hit she just got real good at hitting those things. That could be a bit of that.
So yeah, no, I just wanted to call that out as a interesting little statistic for players who are out there who are primarily defenders sometimes, and you do get sometimes branded as a defending player or not.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of specific players, who were your standout players for Void, everyone?
I can't go past Ems as a rookie. I had great fun playing against them, and they just did really well. Like, they really did.
Yep, 4 Eyes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Stingers. Just the fact that he could just basically manipulate the game to his way, and manage to also not only come out with some pretty decent scores, but also help his team out as well. It's, for me personally, a standout player that isn't just like the highest score. It's someone who can actually help the team not only in game but also out as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
I'll put it to Stingers in that one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, kudos to M's first year ZLTAC player, having like obviously a very, very strong performance for a first year player. I'm sure we're going to see him come back, and they're going to be, in that Queensland bloody little cauldron thing, and then she's going to come out even crazier. Maybe she's going to grow like to 6 foot tall and super lanky like the rest of them. Anyway, and also kudos to Stingers for taking like the responsibility of leading a team of people that haven't played together much before. As far as I'm aware, this team hasn't existed in this formation before, and then a couple newbies as well. Obviously done a pretty damn good job. Anything else we'd like to say about Void before we move on to our 26th place team?
Bruh.
Right.
I think we've said. I think I've said most of what I wanted to say, but yeah, it was lovely to see them, and yeah, it was
good fun.
quietly nice to see a Queensland represented across the board. Sorry.
Just drive the knife a little bit and twist it, eh?
Nice. Well, yeah, congrats to Void. Happy to see all of these players back in some formation for next year. And we'll move on. I think I've got everything ready. Let's see how we go to our 26th place team. We have Aegis. We have Wolfie, Wardy, The Wall, Pendragon, SSG, Stonk, and Pogsley. And this team was a seven player team for the whole tournament.
Oh,
the whole tournament. Yeah. So like a real genuine 7 player team. I suppose I should talk about Aegis, shouldn't I? All right, I'll say a couple of things. Won't I? Yeah. Well, Aegis is obviously a team that's existed in pretty much a very similar roster for the last few years. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think they started off a little bit not as well as they would have liked, but that is you could be attributed to the fact that I'm pretty sure only a handful of them went to Prenets 2. So there was a lot of lack of Helios 2 experience. We don't have Helios Pro at home at all, so we're not familiar with trigger lockout. Not having trigger lockout, so that's always a thing that Adelaide has to adjust to when we go to a tournament. And then obviously a 7-player team, it's, as Nickel was kind of talking to before, in an ideal world, you'd have a 5-player team and no one gets injured, and then you get the perfect synergies, but it's not. And so you get a 6-person team to account for that. And then 7 just means that you it makes it harder to build up those really strong synergies. So just jump over to these stats right away. Predicted 23rd, finished 26th. So obviously, I'm pretty sure they finished. Oh, where did they finish last year? Just someone from Aegis is in the chat. Let me know. I forgot where you guys placed last year. But yeah, on this team, in terms of the roster from last year, so Wardy, Pogsley, Wall, SSG were the 4 players that retained from Bendigo last year, and they picked up Wolfie, who was on Anomaly last year, Pendragon, who was on Anomaly last year, and then Stonk, who is SSG's twin sister, and it was her first year as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't know. In terms of how this team played, obviously I didn't actually get to play them much in Hobart, but from talking to them and playing with them a lot at home, obviously, and we do play a lot of team games in Adelaide. You'll have usually Wardy is kind of leading the charge. He's a very, very strong left-handed attacking player. He's really good at just like sweeping through bases. He's one of those players that doesn't really like lunge. He kind of just like sweeps through and like shoots everyone on the way. You know, sometimes he likes to laugh at you as he does it, which kind of hurts in the moment. But you know, little giggle, didn't hurt anyone. But Wardy was kind of leading the charge. Wall was obviously is a very prevalent defensive player. So he was kind of managing the defense in terms of like, oh, you know, you go in that door, you go in that door. Oh, we don't have anyone on that door. Maybe you should go over there. And we had Wolfie was kind of running the mid. So, you know, that third person in your defense that's occasionally like pushing out to help your, you know, basically convert your 2-player attack into a 3-player attack suddenly. And then between Pogsley, Pendragon, SSG, and Stunk, they kind of filled the rest of the positions. I think, obviously, by the stats, I think Pogsley was kind of more often than not was their opening batsman, the first person to go out with Wardy. You know, what do we have? We had some decent base averages for the team. You know, we had a positive base average from the top 3 players. Denies weren't like too egregious. You know, I think, you know, one shot every game isn't the end of the world. You miss every shot you don't take, as I like to always say. Any other significant stats? Wall racking up the 1.29 for denials 4, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. I think Wall's stats here are actually like the first one out of like a team where you can just look at just those stats and go, he was a defender. And we don't want to call them necessarily anchors because it's not. We do call like anchors for teams or like last stop or last
line,
whatever you want to call that, last line, whatever you want to call that position. Anchor is not great because it has negative connotations. But you know, like this is a stat line where you sit there going, shit, we know exactly. Sorry, I swore. I apologize. We know exactly what we know exactly what Wall did and what he was doing well. So it's a fascinating one there. It'd be interesting to know whether or not, as a team of 7, how they rotated their team, or whether or not we saw Wardy, Wolfie, and Pogsley in most games with the rotating 4 at the back. I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head whether or not I paid enough attention to that rotation during the competition. But it would be an interesting one because the base takes, obviously, and sort of the denials on bases and things is quite stark. There's a bit of a jump between those. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is probably another case of Aegis having like a good start, even in like trainings at home. You know, it might even be an Aftershock Apex game, but out of nowhere, you know, Aegis just comes through and they end up getting like 2 or 3 hits on us before like Apex has even gotten a hit on us, and they can have a really strong start. They're definitely capable of that, and they're you know, their defense is no slouch either. Obviously got really good crisp and standing outy comms from SSG and Stonk.
That's a new sentence.
Yeah, I just made it up. Their defense, like their starting defense, is, you know, very like it's pretty good. And but yeah, occasionally they'll be able to have a super strong start. But I think looking at the stats, this is another example of like when we were looking at the one of the other teams, I forget which one, where like you can have like a really good start, but often the difference between the teams that are in the bottom tier versus the teams that are breaking into like the mid tier is the well-roundedness, and like whether like after you have that really strong start, whether you just like drop off because you can't like keep up that momentum and keep pushing the pace of the game. And so yeah, I can definitely see this being a thing. To speak a little bit to how they decided subbing and stuff, I think they tried to make it as even as they could. You know, sometimes on a per base basis, like, oh, you know, this player is very good at this base, or this player hates attacking that base, so we won't play them when we have to attack them. And then also kind of what you were talking about before, Nickel, on the, you know, if you have a player that is, you know, maybe they have a bad game and they're like really like frustrated, you know, getting in their own head or whatever, like they were very quick to like, all right, you're sitting the next game. So
cool.
Yeah,
We've got
as
I think
far as I'm aware,
Wolfie,
that's how they did it.
Yeah, and there's some fascinating ones. So Wolfie in the chat suggests a standard 3 with the other 4 rotating, but how they did that on game to game would be really interesting. And it's a fascinating, as a captain, to run a team like that is very different to running a team of 5 or running a team of 6. So, really interesting. I'm trying to think. We played against them obviously a couple of times. I remember coming up against the wall from an attack point of view, but
Yeah.
I unfortunately actually don't have a huge amount of memories on like what I was thinking about when I was playing against this team, and I have no idea why that is. It could have been we just missed each other a few times. They were a little bit higher in the placings, so through cascades, and they jumped obviously quite well in that first round robin into the cascades.
Yeah,
So they were probably high enough or far enough away that we would have only ever really played them once or twice. So, bit of a drop at the end though. So, it's an interesting thing to consider, and we're going to see this with a couple other teams. And there are some teams that are notorious for dropping in Ascensions. The Dragons, so the ACT's A team, is notorious for doing it. They will drop. They can't do Ascensions. This is the first year in a long time that they've done it. But do either of you guys have any thoughts as to what may have happened in Ascensions here for Aegis?
Yeah, I think it's, it could be also, I mean, a bit of it is like the fact that the bottom, I forget what the cutoff was. Maybe one of you guys can remind me, but there was a cutoff where you only had one game, and if it was second or third, you're out. What was
it? Was
the cutoff?
17th. It was 17th. It was high.
Yeah.
Hence our pre-conversation about this.
Yeah, and then obviously, in that kind of a system, there's not really room to have a bad game, and it's just kind of whoever's the best team in that game. I feel like as a result of that, maybe you're a slow starting team. You're a team that like you usually need like a warm up game before you can really get into it. I know Aftershock in trainings, like from my own experience, like every single first game we have at training is just like abysmal. We're like, yep, warm up game's over. We even had that at nationals, like the first game of the day. We were like, "Yep, we got our warm up game over." That was awful. But it's a kind of system that really punishes if there is any teams that do need like that one game to really get into the groove of things, or it could just be sometimes it's a 3-team game. It's a super chaotic game as it is. It could have been any number of things happen in that last game where normally. Like Aegis in the past has always like actually done a climb as well. I think this is the first time I remember where Aegis has not climbed at least 1 or 2 positions on the last day. But yeah, I think it's mostly could be attributed to just that really harsh cut. But did you have any thoughts on it for us?
Yeah, I mean, it just, like you said, it just comes down to how you play on the finals day, and if you haven't slept well the night before, if you're in your own head about it or anything like that, it can all play a factor into how you perform on the finals day. And sometimes it gets to people more than others. I don't know specifically about Aegis, but from my experience playing against them, they were generally pretty well oiled. Their comms and stuff were pretty decent towards each other, and especially going up against the wall from an attacking point of view. I hated it. I don't like it. I don't want to do it again, but I know I'm probably going to have to. But it's just like, it's really cool to see specifically how they structure their games from not only an attacking point of view but also a defending point of view. So yeah, it could have just came down to the day where all the cylinders weren't exactly firing, or it was too cold. It could have been anything.
It was cold.
I mean, I'm from New Zealand, man, and it's cold here, and it was cold there too. So,
well, who would your standout player for the Aegis team be, gentlemen? I'll add one as well for this one. Why not? You go first.
Yeah, or I'll go with the wall. Yeah. Again, him facilitating things from a defensive point of view, and also just his defense in general. Just really outstanding. I like to see it, and it's yeah, definitely a personal favorite of mine, especially going up against them. I always knew he was around if I was anywhere near their base. I was just waiting for the wall to come crashing down.
He's hard to miss. But sometimes he is. Sometimes he can be super sneaky. We've got these little, at home, we've got these little half height panels that are like, I don't know. I'm not a very tall guy. I'm a bit of a shortman. And they're like probably up to my hip, right? And then less so in this arena, but in previous arena iterations, there's been like the way the base has been set up is like the half height is in a place where you can kind of like hide behind it. And so the thing people would do sometimes is like, you know, your team might dump and then you'll always have one player that's like, oh, I'm going to stay around for a denial. And Wall would always be that damn dude. And he would somehow like, he would get into a proper good squat to get in there. And he made it work. So, you know, he's hard to miss, but also, I don't know, he can do like the Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, like stand perfectly still and he just turns invisible.
That's so good.
Yeah. Anyway, and he always laughs at you when it happens as well. You know,
Can
big
confirm.
big man, deep belly laugh. It feels awful. Nickel, who's your stand-up player for the ages, guys?
Well, I'm going to say the Wall as well, primarily because like he is the one that stands out to me from from just a playing against them perspective. There were some really good performances by Wolfie as well through the whole competition. It was really interesting playing against Wolfie and Wardy there. But I think there's not enough. The people who score bases and get the high scores get a lot of accolades in this game. It's just the way the statistics work as well. The Wall is your consummate defender, and kudos to that, because it takes a very strong mind and a strong-minded player to be able to hold those defensive lines for a whole game over and over and over again when you hear the game going on around you. And I think that's underrated. And if you can find players that do it, they're worth gold. But they're never going to win those statistical. They're never going to be on the scoreboard with the highest statistics. And I think we should reward, or we should celebrate those players more than we do.
100%.
Yeah, fair.
Well, I said I was going to pick a stand-up player, but I just can't choose one because.
Cop out. Go
Soft.
All right. I'm gonna. Well, I'm gonna choose Pendragon due
Good
to
pick.
less to do with their performance at nationals specifically, but just there's I've been really, you know, they're still a relatively new player. They've only been to one nationals. They hadn't played for very long before going to Bendigo nationals either. But I've just been really pleased to see the development of their game. You know, they're always rocking up. Like they're very, very rarely miss a training. You know, they're starting
awesome.
to. It's cool to see they're starting to, you know, really like find their groove. You know, starting to move around a little bit quicker, feel a bit more confident around the arena. And I think confidence is a big part of this game. You know, if you go up to take a duel against someone and you don't expect to win it, you're probably not going to win it. But if you do that same duel and then you kind of just go like, whether you just like don't think about the fact like, oh, that guy's, you know, that player's really good, or you think I can beat this person, and you take that duel, like that's can already have like a massive effect. And I've just seen a bit of that from Pendragon recently. So kudos to them. Keep going, keep rising.
Nice.
Obviously, Stonk, first year player, like being a first year player is always going to be, you know, so many different learning curves, especially coming from, I think the transition from like having a really harsh trigger lockout at home to no trigger lockout as a door defender is particularly punishing, because you go from being able to like sit on your door and just kind of like lock it down and, you know, out time people with the trigger lockout to suddenly like that kind of that crux is just like gone, and then they can just double with you, or they can just win the duel. I think that's a really hard adjustment. So, you know, hopefully I'm pretty sure all of these players will be sticking around.
Cool.
In maybe a similar variation. quite a lot of things are looking like they're going to shake up and change in Adelaide, actually, and all the different teams. So we'll see what that looks like. But Nickel, did you have something you wanted to add?
I only wanted to just back your point up with Pendragon. Highest tag streak amongst this team, at least on the stats board I have next to me, was 10 in a row. And that was held by Pendragon for this team. So
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that checks out because I think Pendragon was one of their main door defenders, and more than likely that was probably from like a field pointing position. But still,
Yeah.
like, was that a chain tag or a tag streak?
That's a tag streak.
Still, that's still pretty
The
cool.
highest chain tag was 9, and that was Wardy.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Nice.
Sorry, I was
Nice,
reading the
Gary.
chat as well. I am awful at multitasking. Treasure Center players, do either of you have points of improvement for Aegis going into next year?
I think it's going to be much the same. I think if they keep the same team, what it will be is bringing the I'm going to say like the newer half of the team up and bringing that consistency up. Because like, how scary would this be if you get Pendragon, SSG, and Stonk up to that sort of top of 5K, maybe 6K line, especially on a team which is a little bit bigger. That consistency will win you a good couple of extra games, I think. So I think, like a lot of these teams, it's building those newer players or that newer structure up. And if you're going to change the team, then that's fine. But if it stays much the same, that's what I think the big thing is.
Four Eyes, you got something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say exactly the same thing. Yeah, just the consistency over, just to keep playing, just keep practicing, especially when it comes to playing together. Obviously, it's a bit harder with a bigger team, but the more you guys do it, the easier it'll become. And especially if you're used to being really hard on yourself, it's just try and keep it in mind that it was just a rough game. Next game's a new one, and just do what you can, and just get the feedback from the people around you. If you feel like you didn't do well and you don't know why, maybe just have a chat with some of your teammates. Just bring each other up.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I have to add is just to carry on with that sentiment I was saying before about post-tournament, the months after that in your training, whenever you're playing, is the best time to upskill, learn new things, develop things you're not very strong at, all of that kind of stuff. They've already kind of gotten started on that. Like, Wardy has traditionally always been a very offensive player. In the trainings recently, he's been putting himself in defense to try and round out his skill set. Wolfie has always been like generally a pretty well-rounded player, but like his understanding of the strategy and like when to make decisions, like big macro decisions, has been a weakness for him. And so he's started captaining at trainings and also being proactive about it, not just like, oh, I'm just going to captain training and then like not have a specific goal or not try and ask anyone else like that is good at it about it. Like, he's actively asked Fuggen from the captain for Aftershock to join him in our, like, when we're doing our mixed team games, to basically like shadow him in a way, or like still playing like on the team, like, going out and attack with him, but like ask him to like, hey, can you actively like try and think about the game as a captain when I'm captaining, so afterwards you can tell me like the things that you thought were questionable or things that did good. So I think being proactive about not just rocking up to training, have a specific role, and then a specific skill set within that role that you want to get better at every single week, and don't just do it for 1 week and then move on to the next thing, because it's not enough. You need to spend months and months of time devoted to a single project to actually see proper results out of it. So I think that's something that Wardy and Wolfie are really kind of leading the charge on, and I hope to see that resonate with the rest of the team. But yeah, anything else we'd like to add about Aegis?
It's pretty well rounded.
So let's move on. I think we've got a new state coming up for this next one.
We do. So moving on to our 25th place team. I hope I've done everything, set up everything right. Here we go. We're the Darwin Dingoes. We got Bubbles, Tricky, Battlebot, 1, 2, 3, Prince Koala, and Haddo. Transitioning back, that was a bit sloppy. My bad. Anyway, so they were predicted 22nd, finished 25th. Looking at this, they had a monster climb from round robin to Cascade 1. That's kind of crazy. How many positions is that?
Yeah.
Talk about taking the elevator in the middle of the arena up there.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one, I think, to unpick. And I'd love to get, once we get through this, sorry, I've just jumped in, guys, I apologize, but I'd love to get LSA's reasoning around the 22nd, because I think it's a really interesting one, because they smashed their way through this during Cascade 1. But this is also one of those teams where, for instance, I don't know a couple of these players. A couple of these players are brand new, but a couple of these players were around when I first started. So you got either end of the extreme in this one. So yeah. What was, where was the 22nd? Not to put any pressure on it, but I'm intrigued by this, because this is a team that I know some of them, but I have no idea about the others.
Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull up. The
no pressure.
Tournament preview. Just going through my Google Drive. Bear with me. ZLTAC predictions. Bam.
So some odd. While he's finding that, there's some. Thank you for the New Zealand is more constitutionally acknowledged than NT in the chat, and that these guys had an Icarus bounce then normalized, which is it's actually something we do see out of teams. This is obviously, and I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, guys, because I've been away for a little bit, but you will occasionally see these teams that will just smash their way up, and be it just they were on fire on the day, they had a really good draw in some cases, or a combination of the two, and they climb arguably higher than they technically should, and it normalizes in cascades. If anyone's watching this actually from the outside and is wondering why we have round robin in the second two cascades, is to do exactly this, is to normalize your position. So if you overshoot the mark, then you should be theoretically dragged backwards if you are higher than you're meant to be from the skill bracket.
Just looking at the predictions thing. So the way we do the LSA predictions is I write down, I brain it, and I just go, I eyeball, I go, yeah, I reckon that looks good. And then I get a bunch of other people to do it. So like, for the review, for the previous streams, I had guests join me. So I had each of them give their predictions. And then I also did a community predictions as well. Community predicted Darwin Diggers in 22nd as well. But basically, there was a couple above, couple below, but on average, they got a 22nd final LSA prediction. That's where that came from.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat saying that Dingoes probably kind of undersold themselves during round robin, and therefore their climb is even like, I'm not going to say artificially boosted, but if they really should have been in sort of 25th, they were 29th on the end of the round robin, which means they arguably should have had some nice, easy games for them through Cascade 1, which may have helped with that rise as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let me pull up the. This is our first 5-player team as well, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
Who was Nickel? You said you're gonna. Yeah, I was just making sure.
I think I was going to talk about them a little bit here. So, yeah, really interesting. Interestingly enough, quite a consistent team. Obviously, they run the risk of a 5-person team. If someone gets injured, they're in trouble. But what we see here is obviously fairly consistent across the board. The synergy that you would hope that they produce, obviously, through the competition, because they're always playing together. There's never any rotations out. They'll work that out faster than other teams, theoretically. It was an interesting one to see. Bubbles obviously being the perceived strongest, arguably strongest player, very much the people would assume was there leading their attack, and he did, and the statistics bear that out. We saw a bit of maybe tension outside of the games from this team, which was really interesting. And that's obviously always very dangerous when you have a team of 5 and you can't sit people.
Yeah.
We talked about this last game, with the last couple of teams where if someone has a really rough game, it's oftentimes good to sit them for a game, to let them calm down, rather than take that negative energy into the game. However, despite the tension outside the game and seemingly sometimes inside of it, it didn't seem to affect them as much as you might see it in other teams. And I wonder whether or not that comes from some of the old experience you have with Bubbles and Tricky being there to kind of level that out a little bit. And despite Bubbles occasionally maybe being a little bit sharp with the words, he's been playing for long enough that he understands that better than maybe some of the younger players, and then calms down a little bit quicker. And that comes with experience. So that was my big takeaways from seeing this team play, which was always really interesting, because especially for Bubbles, like Bubbles was one of the earliest people I ever met playing laser tag. So yeah. Anything that jumped out at you, Four Eyes, for this one? I've got a couple of little bits and pieces, but anything off the bat for you?
I think the main thing for me is that in each game we played against them, they always started off with a hiss and a roar, and then it kind of got to the middle of the game. I'm not sure if it was just trying to get people through bases or that sort of thing, but yeah, they were always really strong to start off with, and it was just the consistency keeping it through to the end of the game. Sometimes they were really good at it. Other times they'd kind of just like fizzle out maybe just a little bit too much. But overall, I think they managed to keep the consistency to a point where it obviously shows in the rankings, where they jumped up like a Mount Everest, and then they kind of leveled out a little bit. That's kind of how they played their games as well, I feel. Not trying to take away anything from them, but yeah, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but yeah.
I think I'm looking at the stats and then also just thinking back, like we've had a variation of the Dingoes playing at Nationals for quite a while now. Obviously different players have swapped in and out, but for the most part, it's always been Bubbles and Tricky. But I think something that's been consistent with the Dingoes every single year is that I feel a lot of the pressure and the onus is on Bubbles to have a good game, for the team to have a good game. And if Bubbles has a bad game, the team has a bad game.
Right.
And that's not to say that the players on the team aren't capable of accounting for that, but I think the team just isn't set up in a way that they're able to, if that kind of makes sense. I can speak to my own experience with Aftershock, where something we noticed with Fuggen captaining is that he was kind of micromanaging and having to do a lot of things, right? And the captaincy is already like the most stressful position, but if you just keep layering on, like you figure out, oh, like when this happens, we need to do that. Like the responsibilities on the captain, they have to make that call. The more times you add these things on, it just gets more and more stressful on your captain and your lead attacker, and then their ability to make good decisions, stay calm, and even just execute the fundamental skills of the game, right? Because even if you're making good decisions, if you can't execute the fundamental skills of the physical skills of the game, it doesn't matter. If the onus is everything is on them, then your team is kind of doomed to fail as soon as they have a rough start. Right? It doesn't even have to be a bad game. Like if they have a rough start, it can be really hard to recover. An adjustment we made was trying to distribute as much of that responsibility from the captain throughout the whole team. And a lot of that was just the team understanding why we're doing, like why Sean is making decisions when he does, so that we can kind of assist in that process, if that makes sense. So we're not necessarily making big decisions. It's just, we very well drilled, play a lot. Obviously, I might ask Bubbles can maybe answer like what their training looks like in Darwin at the moment, but just distributing as much of that responsibility from the captain as you can. That can be as simple as, rather than the captain having to come back to base and swap people out themselves, like they just send you, and then you go, and then you you have to fill that position, and then someone else comes out, and the captain doesn't have to do that big trek. They don't have to think about it. They just go swap that person, and it's done. That's just a very simple one. There's also stuff like, maybe you're defending, all right? You're in the door defender Daryl, okay? And then you go, there's no one here. And then you push up a bit, and you go, oh, I'm getting a bit of points. But then maybe you see your team is attacking the base that you're sniping at, and rather than just kind of sitting back, you can go, oh, I'm going to go join them for like 1 life. And you sprint up, bam, 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 shoot a bunch of people, and then suddenly you've got a 3-man attack. They've gotten a base, cool. And your captain didn't have to make that decision. It was just kind of your team was set up in a way, and the discussion had been there, and the training was there to go, if I'm field pointing and I see my team, I have the freedom to push up a little bit further to secure a base and then come home. It's not something that your captain has to organize. It just happens. And that's just another example. There's a bajillion things, but I think the Dingoes is a team that very much could benefit from taking some of that load off of Bubbles. And that also could be attributed to what you were saying before, Nickel, about there was a bit of abrasiveness from Bubbles after games, because there is so much pressure on him, and when things go bad, it's going to affect them more after the game, right? So I think in pretty much all aspects, like out of game, in the game, everything, being able to figure out how to distribute some of that responsibility from the captain to the rest of your team is like a massive improvement. And it's not even that hard. It's just you need to actively think about it and spend, again, like I was saying before, devote a significant amount of time practicing it.
So I think I want to call this out because we've obviously this is quite a pointed analysis of a team compared to some of our other ones. And I want to point out that Bubbles is in the Twitch chat, and he has turned around and said, I had to tell the guys a couple of times after games not to talk to me right away. And that is showing 2 things. 1, he understands that, and 2, that's that experience coming in where we talk about, if you only have 5 players, you don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to sit a player. You have to be able to tell your players exactly that. They've also talked in the chat here about the fact that the Darwin scene is also quite small. It's we're lucky to get 9 players for trainings and things like that, which makes it which obviously means you've got AVD, and that you're going to start to struggle with that, with giving people the ability to step into roles which you can train as a functional 5v5 or a 5v5v5. And I think we see that a little bit in the sense that you've got potentially some trouble pushing people through bases with this team of 5. And whether or not that's experience or that ability to sort of share the load coming through. We see it with some other teams. It's just a little bit more pertinent on a team of 5, where you don't necessarily have that additional sort of player. Tricky obviously steps in to act as that sort of second pack point player as well, with that experience there. So that shouldn't be understated either. So yeah, it's an interesting team to watch, and I'd be very intrigued to see how they go next year. Because as you said, the Dingoes tend to bring a team every year. I don't know how consistent the team has been over the last few years, but obviously with a smaller scene, and hopefully we see that grow.
Yeah,
he's saying he's usually a
crossed,
brick. But from side up to side up, it can be done. Tricky, promise. You can rebuild scenes, and I really hope they see that uptick there, so they can try and bring more players into it, both for the training and potentially more players into the teams.
I think on that note, obviously, Bubbles said it's hard to train field pointing pushes in team games when you can't play team games, which is, that's probably valid. But
very.
I think, you were kind of saying how you were doing, AVD kind of stuff, but I don't know what that looks like in Darwin, but I know something that I do in Adelaide. Whenever we do like a few sets of AVDs, I get people to choose like players that they want to work with. So maybe it's like, a player that you don't normally play with, but you want to learn something from them, like a lower tier player wanting to play with a high tier player, and they have the freedom to ask them. Cool, they can pair up for an attack. Or maybe you want to work your team's three player defense. Cool, they can do that. But I think a big thing of the AVDs and actually getting value out of them is one, actually having an objective of like what you want to get out of the AVD other than just playing an AVD. So, i.e., who had the lowest base average on this team? Hatto. Okay, so it looks, obviously by the stats, whether it was just because Hatto didn't go out on attack much, or maybe they struggled on attack, when you go back and do your AVDs, your focus can be, okay, I'm going to focus on Hatto, working with Hatto and improving their ability to take bases, because the time right after a tournament is the best time to upskill. Okay, and so that's the set conscious effort objective. You play your set of AVDs, and then you actually reflect and talk about it afterwards. So, in Adelaide, when we do a set of 3 and we have like 2 minutes between every 5-minute AVD, and that time is devoted to being able to like, so that, you remember that time when you like, we were about to set up a pin on this door and you kind of went in early. Yeah, so it's, obviously you going in early meant we weren't able to get in the bed. You know what I mean? Just, it's not enough to just, I want to practice my attack, so I'm going to attack an AVD. It's like, it needs to be more specific than that if you want to really maximize the amount that you get out of your trainings. And that's just something that I've been really pushing in Adelaide, the last year or two. And if it's something you're already doing, then fantastic. And if it's not, that's maybe something that you can add to your trainings. But that's done.
I just want to. We've deep dived Dingoes a little bit here, which is great, and I hope it hasn't been taken the wrong way in any way. I do want to call out just again a statistic which we did for the last one, which was the highest tag streak. The highest tag streak here, and you look at it on the stats here with the tag ratio being at 0.99 for Hatto. The highest tag streak was 11. So I suspect, and you can call me out in the chat, Tricky and Bubbles, that Hatto was doing a good job of being Tricky's second for last line defender, perhaps. And that might also explain, when you've got a team of 5, might also explain the fairly low base average.
Yeah.
Because if you attack stalls and you get the 7 or 8 bases, Spuddo was indeed last lining. There you go. The statistics don't lie, guys. What you can do? Spuddo equals. I figured as much, Bubbles. I figured that Spuddo equals Hatto. Last things to say, maybe, about the team?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What would your stand-up player be for this team, guys? If you were to choose one.
I'll chime in here. I'm going to go with BattleBot.
Yeah.
He was the type of person. Whenever we played them, he was kind of always there. And what I mean by that is he was always pushing up, or he was always at the door, or he was always defending. And it was just, I think it kind of relayed back onto Bubbles. Like, he could rely on him quite well. And just not only with his stats there as well, but he was the type of person for me to see that he could be relied on in terms of the games. Like, if there was a comm made to him, he'd acknowledge it and just go straight away. Like, there wouldn't be any hesitation or anything like that. Like, he was someone that was just keen to get amongst it, which was pretty cool to see for me.
Yeah,
cool.
I was probably leaning that. I was probably leaning that way as well, to be perfectly honest. I don't know BattleBot, Hatto, or Koala very well, being like, they're just not familiar faces for me. But yeah, don't give him a big head. Okay, not BattleBot. Can't choose BattleBot. BattleBot got tagged the most in his team by his own team. That's what really.
Well, there you go. That
right.
backs up my statement as saying that he was always there.
Look, I hope to see I hope Darwin gets consistency in their player base, because it would be cool to see this team come back and hit that 20-second sort of again. We're seeing a trend here. Bring up that back half of the team, or that newer players up a little bit. Though your score average here is quite good, but we can see that score average is quite good without bases. So we know where to work there. So
Yep. Smash the AVDs. Get everyone good at cracking bases and taking bases while shooting people and stuff. That helps. Cool. Any last bits we want to say about Dingoes before we move on?
Yeah, man. Like I got a lot of love and respect for Bubbles and Tricky. Like I know they've been playing together for years now. But yeah, just them coming back every year. It's always good to see them. And especially just having quick yarns with Tricky outside of a game. Like, he's a unique character and it's great. And same with Bubbles. Got a lot of respect for the guy. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see some of us old hands still here. It's really good. And Tricky, like me, is never going to leave now because he has a side of his own. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, yeah. Best of luck to Darwin in building up your scene when you get home. Hopefully, we can see resurgence. Everyone, I think everyone's slowly starting to recover. Some people have recovered quicker than the rest, but we just got to keep on keeping on. Eventually, we'll be back to full strength, I reckon. Moving on to the next team, we have the Quackening. So we had the BMW, Plank, Stinky, Tech Deck, Elmo, and Commander Snake. Boom! That was perfectly timed. Wait, did I say the right team? Did I say the right team?
You said Quackening, but you got
you did say
Paradox up there.
Quackening, but I think you had Quackening up there. Pretty sure you had Quackening up there.
Let me go back one. Okay. One sec. Give me one moment.
Thank you, BMW. I'm glad I wasn't going crazy when I saw.
I skipped one. That's my bad. Anyway, let's pretend that didn't happen. Anyway, best of luck to Darwin building up your thing. The next team we're covering is WA Paradox. We have not Basilisk, Phoenix, Keikis, Jet, Arbol, and Ash. Wow, look at that perfect transition.
It was going to happen at some point. It was going to happen.
That's a stream moment if I've ever seen one. Anyway, Four Eyes. I need to go cower away in embarrassment. How about you take us away with WA Paradox?
I think out of everyone that I refed and or played against, Paradox are the most memorable for me. Obviously, they were pretty consistent in terms of their placement as well. They finished round robin in 24th, dropped a couple spots in Cascade 1, but then bounced back for Cascade 2, and then just a bit of bad luck on the Ascension day, as pretty much a lot of these teams have had, including my own, but we'll get there. Yeah, I think out of everyone, their cohesion and everything like that was pretty well rounded. I don't really have any, not really any negative things to say about them. Like I've got a couple of critiquing points, but we'll get there. But in terms of how they did overall, I think it was pretty well consistent. If you ask me, I don't know if you guys have anything to add on to that, but yeah.
Nicole?
I think it's interesting because especially I didn't realize they had predicted 30th and to come in 24th. They were just super consistent. And they didn't seem, they just seemed consistent through it. They never seemed like a particularly scary team from our perspective down at the bottom of the ladder. Like when we saw them, we were like, okay, but they clearly didn't shift. They clearly came in and they kept pace with all the teams around them, and you could see that through it. And I think part of that comes from some experienced players in there and a good balance of that. So, and we'll see that in the players, I think.
Here we go.
I love Jet's photo.
Some people like to spice it up, and I'm all for it. Everyone else has got like their best passport photo face going. I actually have. Hold on. You guys keep going. Give me one sec.
So,
not gonna lie,
what did this team do well?
Arbol looks like he's seen some things, eh? Like just that stare
really
straight
does.
ahead.
So what do we say about this team, man?
For me, I think these guys did really well on comms. A lot of the games I refed them. Ash was under the base. It was particularly red base that I remember, and it was just constant communication, which was really awesome to see. You know, there were people out doing their thing, but on the back door, front door, A or B, or left and right, or whatever you want to call it, um, there were just it was just constant communication with everyone. And even for me as a ref, I knew where everyone was and like what everyone was doing. And as a player, like for me, like comms are one of the main things that are important to me. Like I don't care if your score is like negative, like if you have great comms, like that's it. You know, that's the one of the main foundations for a good team, and that's what I think they did really well.
Yeah, I think a
But
team of 5 or 6 people that are like, they're decent, but their comms are like, wow. Will always, like, especially over the course of a whole nationals, will prevail over a team of 5 players that are objectively better at shooting people, but maybe their comms are very, a bit questionable.
I don't have an answer for this, and maybe the chat can tell us, because I know a couple of them. I know Jets in the chat, for instance. Is this a team that's been together in this constructed format for a couple of years now? Because that's what it felt like. From a comms perspective, they all felt like they trusted each other, and that's something that you see out of teams that have to reform or get new players in. Even if it's only 2 out of the 6 have to change, you have to kind of relearn some of that. And this is something that they did. Harbor didn't play any training with them. This is something that it felt like they did really, really well, was just know what each other was saying, being able to hear them. So Harbor had to play an Nats game on his own.
Keiki
The chat's
they
gone
played together
nuts.
for 5 months.
Okay, so
wow.
really, so kudos to them. Kudos to them for that. I do think this is a really interesting one, though. We've got obviously, our average scores across I'm going to say bottom 4, but from Phoenix through to Jet is obviously a little bit higher, which is always good. Really interesting to see them to be quite blunt, fairly low base average for this team. Like, even compared to the previous teams we've seen, the base average for those 4 players is actually really low. Despite that, your scores are pretty good. And those top 2, KKZ and Arbels, like they are some nice average scores. Like really, really good. So Jet with having denied nobody the entire game. Someone's in the chat saying
She was never denied. That's what that is.
No, she was never denied. She was never denied. Well done.
No.
Sorry, I get that wrong. But yeah, I think that's really interesting to see two really consistent and fairly high top end paired with a consistent but relatively low. We're not seeing a lot of denies, for instance, as well. Like, again, the actually getting denied is really low through that bottom 4. So just an interesting insight into it. Never desired.
I heard it, but I wasn't going to say anything. I was like, well.
Yeah, I've got a blocked nose, man. I'm going to do it eventually. I'm going to say something stupid, and someone's going to be like, what? And just clip it, and it'll be on the internet forever.
I think I admittedly only played WA Paradox once. Maybe you guys can correct me on this, but did they generally play a pretty low base game?
I think so. Or they play a game that's very consistent with their attack teed out, with a fairly static defense. So we talked about it a little bit before around like how do you call players in and out. So there's this reliance on KKZ and Arbol to get those bases and then potentially pull players out.
Yeah.
If available.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting because like the base stat is actually relatively similar to what we've seen for a lot of the other teams, and we were kind of saying with them where like their teams on the like the players they had on the top end were getting a lot of the bases, But I think for some teams, they were struggling to kind of, once they had their strong start, keep up that momentum and keep getting bases. But I'm guessing this is the team that either A, was able to get that third, fourth person a base, or B, they were able to, once they had their strong start, kind of lock down the game in a way that meant them only having 4 bases were like still fine.
Yeah, and this is obviously, as we get forward, it would be really fascinating to see the stats against these teams. So it'd be a fascinating one to have a look at, because that's how the stats kind of read, don't they? And it's interesting. It's interesting to see it.
Yeah, it's kind of, Mouse was talking about it in the chat. It's kind of like one of the ultimate, yin yang of like how you can play this game. Like obviously there's room for like heaps and heaps and heaps of strategy, but ultimately it can kind of be boiled down to like, does your team get a lot of bases or do they not get a lot of bases? And then all the little 1%ers in between. Like if you don't get a lot of bases, how are you preventing the other teams from getting a lot of bases? Or if you are getting a lot of bases, it's like, what have you sacrificed to get those bases? If you just dump every game, then sure, you're gonna have a high base stat, but like you've lost 10 every.
But does everybody else also have a high base stat every time they play against you?
I think from what I remember reffing these guys and playing them, they were quite defense heavy. In saying that, they could have pulled people back to defend when we were there or when teams would arrive. But I do remember struggling quite a bit to get in, especially solo, to these guys' bases. Whether I'd be on, like, what I mean by solo is I'm on one side, my teammates on the other, and I'm just having a real rough time cracking in.
They would.
Yeah, sorry, you go.
No, I was going to say they would double up. It was often quite hard to crack one side or the other. You might get one, but you'll never get both sides at once, for instance.
Yeah.
Cake is in the chat and has said, Arbor and I scored well enough, but we probably needed more team cohesion. Base cracking was a little slow for us, which is an interesting take based off the analysis that we just did before, which is we see, good first attacking pair, but then a slower late game. Go back to you, Ryan, and sort of how that works. But one of the things, Cake, to your point here, is the other team members weren't getting denied. Now, whether or not that's because they were just on the outside getting points, fine, and struggling to get in, they weren't pushing in and getting denied in the process, which is an interesting take, and maybe has worked a little bit in your favor here, so we don't lose those. But we're speculating here a little bit. But it's an interesting self-analysis by Cake there, and something perhaps that Paradox is going to work on between now and next Nationals or pre-nats, especially if the same team group is going to come back again cross-country for next year.
Well, too bad your boy Cakey Z's moved to South Australia, baby. I've yet to actually.
That's right.
He's yet to come to a Monday training, but I'm very much looking forward to, because I didn't actually get a chance to speak with Cakey at Nationals or really see much of you, but I'm kind of very excited to meet you and see how you slot in with everyone. But anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. Something I would like to point out is Ash was saying, so Ash is obviously a Darwin player, right? So this is a team that's like 5 West Australian players and then one Darwin player. So there's like potentially a cohesion issue there, but Ash and Jet have been talking in the chat about how as soon as they kind of got together as a group at Nationals, they just gelled really, really well, both inside and outside of the arena. And I think that kind of speaks to what we were saying before about your, like, how you're going to treat each other, and your team cohesion and gelling like in and outside of the arena is really important for transitioning from inside the arena to outside the arena, and then making sure that all of those team talks and stuff are constructive. You can get a little worked up, but like not being just rude to your friends and teammates. And then if on the other side, if someone does start to get a little heated, you understand like where it comes from, I guess, when you have that deeper, like like a better relationship. So I think that's something that did a little bit more of an ethereal thing, but did this team a great service.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. I think it's really good. I think it's a good point to make, and I apologize. I didn't. This shows my lack of the players that have come into the scene post me. I wasn't aware. In the chat, by the way, Ash incidentally is moving to Victoria, so clearly this team is not going to be the same next year, and that's going to represent a bit of a challenge for Arbol. I suspect who will take on that will lead that team into next year. I suspect. But that'll be interesting to see because you lose 2 players there unless Ash comes back and plays for them from Victoria.
I mean, just personally, like if you had such a great team at Nats, I probably would go back and play for that team again. But obviously it's not my decision to make. But just watching them play, it just looked fun. Rather than them like playing, it just looked like they weren't getting too stressy, depressy, and princessy. It was just like a good time. So if it were me, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be keen to play with them again. But yeah.
Ash sort of chiming in saying, just maybe humble brag, maybe a brag. Hopefully it's a brag that they might not be in the country next year for the Nationals. Fine, go traveling.
I see how
Got to
it
use
is.
your holidays to come to Nationals.
As
use your holidays to come to play laser tag.
Who goes on holidays for any other reason than to play laser tag? That's crazy.
Not us.
Spend all your
not
money
with
on laser tag trips.
Yeah, not with a competition that takes 2.5 weeks. What is annual leave? So big thing I think for this team then, just for next year, I suspect is going to be how do you fill out the back of it? How do you fill out those other 2 players? Who are you going to take on? So I think that's going to be a big one for Paradox if they intend to build on the Arbol Phoenix Basilisk and Jet structure of the team.
Yeah, I mean,
Chat's going wild.
I really wish I could see chat right now, but I can't. And before I get,
sorry, I was having a mad yarn with Kiki Z in the chat because I actually haven't spoken to him since. Like, I've heard he's moving to Adelaide, but I actually haven't spoken to him, so I'll just making first contact. Anyway, speaking of players, who is your standout player for the WA Paradox and why?
I liked commentating KKZ, whatever you want to call, whatever the preference is for name, just because it was always fun to watch. I have a soft spot for Arbol, similar to Bubbles, been around for as long as I have, I think, if not longer. So very lovely to see Arbol again after many, many years. So it's pronounced Cake Eyes. That's right. KKZ sounds so much better.
Cake eyes. I mean, that's what I have all the time when I go into a bakery, but
True. Cake, 4-eyed cake. Cake for eyes.
Cake for eyes.
No, this is done. That's done. That's
all right.
over.
Anyway,
4 eyes. Who's your pick?
As much as I love Arbol, I'm gonna go with Jet because it was just a pleasure to watch her play, and it was also fun playing against her as well. I'm still a bit salty that she termed me, but it's because I'm old and Gumby and accidentally put 2 knees on the floor. So that's fair. But yeah, it was a good time. Yeah, and like she was always just so nice outside of game too. Always like striking up conversation and stuff like that. And it was just a pleasure to play with and with those guys. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Yeah, cool. Best of luck to all of these players. It's looking like with a couple people like moving away, it's entirely possible that this team could look completely different. But keep on moving on. It's good to see lots of new players like Cake. How does he say it?
KKZ.
KKZ. Thank you. A first year ZLTAC player just going out and, deciding to slap everyone about a bit. I'm pretty sure they were like 18th on the solo ladder or something. That's
Oh, go on.
crazy first year performance. So I kind of think it speaks to, the WA scene. Again, one of those scenes that kind of fell down a bit by the end of COVID, but is starting to build back up. So it's exciting to see these new players coming through and just, wiping the floor with everyone. And also a bunch of players that haven't been old school players that haven't played for a while coming back is always good fun. But well done, WA Paradox. We'll move on to our next team, which I haven't revealed yet. And I totally didn't bugger up before. We have in 23rd place the Quackening.
Oh, surprise! Wow, where did that come from?
No, not me. Quackening was predicted 24th, finished in 23rd. They had a bit of a roller coaster of a bloody tournament, but Four Eyes, this is all you, mate.
Yeah, probably one of the best teams I've played against. They're just they managed to pull off things that just keep surprising me, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but like it's just I can't. It's a team that you just can't underestimate, because if you do, they'll slap you with their ducks. So yeah, just playing against him, especially BMW. He always has his head screwed on while he's playing. Tech Deck is just someone that you can have a laugh with in game and outside as well. And it's just a team that I enjoy playing against. And again, it shows in their climb as well. Obviously, they all have fun and they all, just get the job done basically. And coming in 23rd, one higher than they're predicted. There's nothing to shake a duck at.
Shake a duck. Wow.
Oh,
crazy.
I appreciate the fact you did it. I still don't like it, even if I do have a kid on the way.
Well, yeah, Four Eyes, what can you tell us about what the Quackening did well?
Again, it's another team with great team cohesion. Yeah, Elmo is definitely one of the guys that is just really easily relied on. And again, Commander Snake had some good times commentating with them. And again, they just did things that kept surprising me, So yeah, their comms in game, the fact that they managed to keep their heads on, and they didn't, let the games that they were playing get to them. They just did what they had to do. And in all fairness, I don't think there's much that I can say to critique them in a way, because I feel like if they just keep doing what they're doing, they're just going to keep climbing.
I think consistency there is a really, really interesting one. And again, I'm gonna be a stats nerd here for a moment. But you look at the tag, like all of their scores on average. And Tech Deck obviously is a little bit lower on the back end there as far as average scores go, but almost everybody here has a tag ratio that's creeping up to that 1, which means they're not giving away points either. For the points that they're getting, they're not giving them away. And I think that's a really interesting one, which, despite the fact that a couple of them are consistently getting bases each game, 3 or 4 of them aren't, but that's okay. But again, their tag ratio, they're not just getting tagged to pieces, which we see in some of the other teams. So this is probably the most consistent team I think so far out of this bottom 10 that we've seen as far as their tag ratios go, while also having relatively consistently high averages, again, of the cohort that we're looking at. And I think that's telling. I do wonder, they obviously came in swinging, and maybe it'd be lovely to see them in the chat potentially what happened in that Cascade 1, because they dropped a lot in Cascade 1. They had a rubbish time. I spoke to a couple of them during it, and they were feeling it, but they clearly came back off that. So that sort of like, I guess, resilience is probably the next big thing to call out for the team. They could have collapsed after that first cascade. You know, that they would have lost. I think they lost all but like one game, I think, during Cascade 1. We had a bit of fun with new strategies. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they were just having fun. But they didn't let it get to them, despite the losses on the scoreboard. So, yeah. 1 win, 1 second through all of Cascade 1. There you go. So, yeah, I think that's kudos to them for that, for the consistency, despite a bit of a roller coaster first half of the tournament.
Yeah, no, I think 100%. Like, I could definitely see a good percentage of teams, if they had that kind of a massive drop from round robin to Cascade 1, kind of really letting it get to them and then it affecting their performance going on from that. But I mean, obviously it didn't. They took it in stride, and I think, yeah, it kind of goes back to maybe I can't talk about, you know, what things they were trying out or whatever, but harkening back to what I was saying before about, like, realistically the only part of the tournament that really matters is probably Cascade 2 and like Ascensions, because Cascade 2 sets you up for Ascensions, and then Ascensions is obviously the big thing. But like round robin and Cascade 1 is the perfect time to, in a new arena, on a new system, try new things out. And you know, you either figure out something really cool and you win games because of it, or you figure out something not very cool and you lose games because of it, but then you win games later because of that, because you don't make that mistake again. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, kudos to these guys for, you know, keeping it cool.
Tech Deck in the chat's like did mention, I'm not good with the scoring, unhappy face. Tech Deck, to back that, you also had the highest DX streak on your team. with 14 DX.
Oh, poor thing.
14 DX streak.
Rough.
That is a rough time.
But can sink a drink of soju. Just gonna throw that in there.
Good to know. Well, what were some from you guys playing against the Quackening? What were the points, the chinks in the armor?
Oh, for me, it would be just a little bit on the defense side of things. I don't want to sound like that guy, but for me, I found cracking their base was on the not easy, but it was a lot less of a mission than some of the other teams that I played against. Whether that would be lack of communication to each other, or just not watching each other's backs, or looking the wrong way at the wrong time, type of thing. But yeah, for me, that's probably the only thing I could call them out on. But yeah,
it's an interesting take on it. I also feel like, I mean, I don't think we crossed paths quite as much again, because of the way that frank how low we were through the competition, to be blunt. But yeah, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, so there's a few of them in the chat, that the comms, and I think the comms potentially let down the base defense a little bit. That sort of that proactive, calling or moving, or like just thinking about what's about to happen next on that, as people like sneak bases and things like that. But I'm being nitpicky, and I'm trying to remember the games that I played against them. So, yeah. What about yourself?
I think I mean, just looking at their stats, like their base average was like pretty decent, and their scores are pretty decent. So I'm going to guess they were getting a decent amount of bases, which is potentially what put them above the teams below them, where a lot of the teams below them weren't getting many bases, and they were kind of stopping at that, the first, like, that 2 to 4. This team was maybe able to get more, and that's what was able to get them up. But if speaking to what Four Eyes was saying, that might be what prevented them from climbing any higher, was not that, but the getting bases but leaking bases at the same time can be good sometimes. but I think particularly at the start of a game, you don't really want it to happen, especially at the end of the tournament, right? You can, once a game's like started to play out and you can kind of figure out like, okay, this team's not doing very well. That's when you can kind of afford, okay, if they get a base on us, but we get a base on the team that's like threatening us right now, that's like a good exchange. But if it's, you know, the other way where you get a base on the team that's not doing so well, but the team that's threatening you gets a base on you, that's not an awesome exchange.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you know, it's just talking about that well-roundedness, right? But I think also I feel like drilling a really strong defense is like takes a lot of work, obviously, but it's one of the easier things to do in terms of like you can do it with just 5 people. You don't need a full cohort of people to practice your defense. You just need 2 people to attack, 3 people defending, or you know, some variation of that. That'd probably be the best one to do because that's the most common thing we see. And then again, just being really specific about what the focus is. It's like not just, oh, we want to get our defense better, so we're going to do some ABDs. That's like it's not good enough. You know, you'll get better just by, you know, doing more reps of it, but you can get like you could see like massive leaps of improvement if you're very specific about what you're trying to improve on. So that might entail, you know, you do a set of 3 or whatever, and then the TAC kind of like breezes through, and then after that set of 3, you go, okay, like why are they able to just get through our base so easy? And then you can identify like one, you know, maybe identify a few issues, and then you just pick one of them, and then just focus on that and make it so you don't make that mistake ever again. And then you can move on to the next thing. But just being very specific about your use of training, and how you like what it, you know, having a specific goal also helps inform your decision making in the game, but also the way you talk about and reflect on the game. Because if you're just reflecting and you're trying to remember all of these different things, it's hard to remember everything and you might miss some important things. But if you're just only thinking about one particular thing, it makes reflecting on it after the game much easier, I think. So that'd be my recommendation for, you know, if this team sticks together in some variation, what they can do in the future to really shore up their defense. Yeah, I think a really strong defense is like the insurance policy of a team, right? Like even if your attack's going really bad, if your defense is held really strong and you're able to actually maintain some level of field points, that's when like the Hail Mary dumps can actually work, because like if you're still able to stay in the field points, if no one's gotten your base, there's going to be a mad rush to get your base right at the end, right?
Yeah.
But if your attack doesn't go well and you leaked a lot of bases, when you do that dump, it's kind of, you know, everything. You've already lost the game before the dump, right? So that's my 2 cents.
It's a very wealthy 2 cents there.
Yeah.
Might be worth at least 5 cents.
Oh, with today's economy, come on.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think that you've kind of, yeah, it's a good roundup for it, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not this team sticks together. I mean, I know we've gone through a few of the WA. The last WA team obviously is going to be ripped apart, so it'll be interesting to see if this one sticks together. Just through the logistics of the players. Yeah. There's quite a few young players on the team as well, which is great to see. So there's a lot of room there. Do we have any
players? Who is our standout players?
Yeah, I was going to say who look, I like bias, mate. Brad and I obviously had lots of chats through the competition. We did a lot of the tournament TO stuff together. So lovely chatting to him. Lovely to see him still playing. That's again similar to Arbor, so these old school players. But I might give mine out to Commander Snake. I've also got one of their shirts. So, but just an impressive stat line. I should point out that Elmo's stat line here there's a really interesting stat lines here. Elmo's 1.5 for the denials and things like that. Commander Snake with a really nice average there, like a really, not saying sorry, and that helps with the whole team. So, yeah, impressed.
Yeah, I was gonna go Commander Snake as well, but since you've covered that off, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give honorable mentions to Plank. He was the guy that was always he was the first one at the base. Like as soon as you're defending, and he'd always be the first one there. Just pretty much like GI Joe, straight ahead.
Always there,
Yeah.
50-50 whether or not he's flashing multiple colors because he got turned.
Yes, yeah. But I'm gonna give my standout player to Elmo, even though he did dip halfway through the comp to attend a wedding. I think
Really?
someone can correct me there.
Mental.
But yeah, he's always great to play against. And again, he's a really strong defender, as you can see by the stats there, like 1.5. So yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that would always be around the base, and he's not afraid to make a call in the game either, and it pays off a lot of the time. So yeah, shout out.
Cool. I'm not going to choose a player, but shout out to Commander Snake. Came to Adelaide for a bit and did a training. From memory, it was a really cursed training because we were having all kinds of technical difficulties. Like for some reason, our arena announcements just disappeared. So it was a kind of cursed night, if I'm honest. But it was good to see you, mate. Everyone in the chat, you're welcome. If you're ever in Adelaide, give your boy a message, and you'll be welcome to attend any of our training nights if you happen to be there around that time. But any last bits we want to say about the Quackening before we move on?
Yeah.
I mean, you could say anything you want about the Ducks, but we'll leave that open to interpretation.
Yeah, let's just leave that one alone. I legitimately had one in my work jacket, and I was in a meeting, and I put my hand in my pocket, and I've just like sort of readjust the jacket, and it squeaked.
Nice. Awesome.
Real good when you're sitting in a meeting room with like a 1-star general. So yeah, not ideal.
That's kind of cool, kind of funny. Keep it up, guys. All right, moving on to our. We've been talking for too long. 22nd place team. We've got 2 left, everyone. We still got good numbers, good viewership. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. 2 more teams left. 22nd place we had the WA Orcas. Cool. On the team, we had Rogue, Simi Bear, Mr. Meeseeks, Drake, and Worthy. Cool. Boom.
Another 3-person team.
3-person?
5-person team. Wow, I'm doing well. I'm tired.
Done well. They've done well for a
Excuse
3-person team. Jeez.
Oh.
Who's talking about the Orcas? Is that
Me? I think
that's Nickel's back. Nickel back.
It was me.
Nice.
Look, this is I was going to say, this is one of those other 5-player teams we've got here, and we talk about consistency, and that's probably the name of the game with this team. And I feel like you run that risk of having that 5th player go down, and they managed to pull this off. We should shout out, actually, we haven't done that at all this one, but the concept of the curse of that is Nat's flu. Is it just me, or we got real lucky this year, which allowed a lot of these 5-player teams not to get like destroyed in one of the various round robins or cascades, because most people managed to escape this, I think, relatively sickness-free, which is great to see.
I think the sicknesses went down, but the number of injuries went up.
Agreed. The number of injuries this year was definitely higher than I remember, and I've seen some pretty gnarly nationals from a decade ago. But
a couple of hospitalizations, right? It's madness.
Yeah. Obviously, we're getting better at looking after them as well, so there's a little bit more pertinence on not, she'll be right, which, again, 10, 15 years ago was very much how we would treat a lot of the things that probably we didn't this year, which is good for a sport. It's better that we're getting that there, that with us as a sport. But it was a rude awakening coming back as a all the volunteering that we did and that I did to see all of it. But this team was just consistent. They had their good games, they had their bad games. They took games off teams they arguably shouldn't have, but they also lost games that they really shouldn't have. But across the board, I think they are probably the most consistent team through the whole comp as far as their positioning goes. I need to double check whether or not there's any in the midfield that kind of did the same. And obviously, the top end is similar, but really interesting to see them. Never quite made it to that 17th. It is on the predicted side, though.
Yeah, I think a bit of that. It was hard to predict the Orcas. I remember we talked about it in the prediction stream as well, because obviously the WA Orcas pre-Nets 3, I think their roster was looking like very different. Like they had Flash Hybrid. I think it was Flash Hybrid and Drake that were meant to go to pre-Nets 3. Drake couldn't because of COVID, and then Flash and Hybrid for their own reasons. But Drake was able to come to Nationals, but Flash and Hybrid didn't come to Nationals, and they had to kind of pick up someone, like, oh crap, like we've lost 2 people, and they picked up someone. I think, who did they pick? Actually, they weren't even able to. They ended up having to pick up a spare player worthy from Bendigo. So that made it really, really hard to predict this team, because it was kind of like we had seen stuff from those players before, and there was kind of like this idea in your head of like what the Orcas are going to be like. Obviously, Bendigo, they did really, really well, and then suddenly there's like a pretty drastic change in the roster, and it made it really hard to place them.
And Lance has pointed out in the chat, because I mean, like even someone like Hybrid, who was around when I first started, and Flash, both big point scorer, like big power players as far as points go. Definitely players that it's always nice to have a couple of those in the team, just to crack bases and things like that. Though what we see out of this team, and Worthy being coming in from the outside, is a super consistent team again. And again, name of the game when we're getting up towards this top end of the top end of the bottom 10 is we're starting to see consistency, and a team that is the base level of it is that much higher, which is really indicative of those lower teams. Goes back to what we were saying about pulling those individual players up amongst those lower teams. But I think this is a really interesting one. Really low base scoring team, though. Really, and even I acknowledge this, I only played them a few times, but they are a really low base scoring game. But it would suggest that they also keep the scores low generally across the board. Again, a tag ratio in the 90s, the 0.9s up to the 1s for 4 out of the 5 players. So really, really interesting.
I think you could probably attribute the good tag ratios and the fact they were able to place as high as they did with such low base ratios. It can probably be attributed to identifying field point. Simi's in the chat, and she's been very active. Yep. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but identifying the like power field pointing positions, and then really optimizing, like, you know, when you're getting when you're getting attacked, crunching hard, making them bugger off, and then going straight to those power positions to get rake in heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of tags. Because if you're not being quick about it, then, you know, there's precious tags you can be missing out on. And in a game like this, where it's like milliseconds, 1 tag, 150 points, you need to be raking up as much as you can. But
couple of comments in the chat, with Drake, for instance, pointing out that he felt like he only played attack for about 1/3 of the comp, yet has the highest bases. Now that could be also because, he did well on the 1/3 of the comp there, but for those ones. But yeah, indicative of the team, and perhaps a very different play style to a lot of these lower teams that try and push these bases, feel like they need to. If there's a comfort level here in not getting them and being able to control the game beyond them. And you've got that in the experience here. I hate to try and predict the number of years of experience between these individuals, but like Simi and Drake were around when I first started, or around when I was started. So, you know, we're looking 10, 15 years there. Rogue, I think much the same. I'm not sure when Rogue's first one was, Rogue was with me in 2008, which was my first nationals. Drake and I have had this chat. Drake is 04, 03. So there is decades of experience there. And that,
Damn.
I think, perhaps is where we see how this team dealt with this lower bracket compared to some of the teams below them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Lance is like the game style is more like a mid-high level game sort of style, that sort of lower base count. You're waiting for other people to stuff up and controlling the game rather than letting your team be reactionary to what other teams are doing. So yeah, really interesting, fascinating, different sort of ATAG matters. Yeah, fascinating statistical line compared to all the teams so far we've looked at. Sorry, I've sort of jumped over the top of this one a little bit. Four Eyes, you guys must have played these guys far more than I did. So, how did you guys feel?
I think I only remember 2 games against these guys, and one of them was in our Ascension game. And I can agree what was mentioned before that if we were trying to attack a base, they would always be on our back. And if we turned around to try and go get them, they'd just collapse hard. And that just, like you said, just goes to show the level of experience that these guys all have collectively. And yeah, it was just one of those things. It was just like, oh, go away, man. Leave me alone. Can you say I'm busy? Look, I'll feed you later. Leave me alone. And it's just like, yeah, whether it came down to yeah, even just trying to get into their base with Mr. Meeseeks, especially hiding in that little default spot in blue, like I'd always try and crack him coming around the corner, and he'd just do a little ha no, and I'd be like, fine, I see how it is. But yeah, no, these guys all collectively did really well for how they were playing it, especially.
And I think, especially given all of these players are primarily traditionally more defensive players, it's, I think they played their cards about as well as they could have, given,
Yeah.
you know, obviously, like, they did have that attacking, you know, that the real horsepower players like Hybrid and Flash, but, you know, losing them, I think they did really well with what they had. And I mean, like, speaking to like the experience, like you were saying before, Nickel, like if you have a team of players that are all very defensive, you need to make those games low base, high field point games. Otherwise, you're just going to get absolutely destroyed. And then obviously they were able to execute on that. So I think kudos to them for kind of, you know, recognizing the hand they'd been dealt and, you know, making the most of it. So
yeah,
well done.
It'll be, I feel that on a deep level, being an inherently defensive player myself and having to play attack this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they do next year. Like, it really will, because obviously Worthy arguably will shift to a different team potentially.
Hopefully we get a full
it'll be interesting to see who they.
Nicole.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see who they pick up, be it 1 or 2 players, and who they might be, and whether or not we see any of the players who are currently there push into consistently attacking. Maybe we see Drake aim to be an attacking player as a standard, depending on who they bring in. But I think it's going to be very telling if they bring in a couple of newer players to try and build that up, or if they try and bring in some of the old experience that is around WA. But who knows? I feel like we're going to see a few changes across WA teams over the next year. There's a lot of WA players in the chat, so sorry if I'm making assumptions that are wrong, guys, but it's going to be super interesting. Super interesting to see.
Yeah, before we wrap up the Orcas, who's your stand-up player for the team, guys? And I actually have one for this as well. Crazy.
So I spent a lot of time with Mr. Meeseeks and Worthy outside of the maze, and I love them both dearly.
Is Nickel all good? Is Nickel back? Hold up, he's having a moment.
So headphone died. Apologies for that.
We can
Spend a
hear
lot of
you.
time with Worthy and these. We can hear Worthy and Meeseeks outside. Love them dearly. But I think I'm going to give it to Drake because I think having to step up in this for this team, I think would have been a really interesting one for him. And his points, he looks like he has amongst the team, sort of stepped out of his comfort zone a little bit there. So that's mine.
For us.
Nice. Yeah. Again, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna give honorable mentions to Rogue, just because he was always that annoying dude, like standing off in the distance, sniping the crap out of me, and it was just annoying. But it's just like I can't be mad at it because he's playing the game and he's doing it well. But I'll give it to AJ, to Mr. Meeseeks. We had a little bit of a moment in one of the games where we had dumped our base and he needed it. And so I kind of sneakily followed him to our base and waited for him to take a shot. And then as he leant out, I was just like, surprise. But no, he was really cool about it. We had a laugh, and yeah, he's just a great guy to play against, and he's a really good defender as well. And his comms are really top shelf as well. So I'll give it to Mr. Meeseeks for that.
Yeah, cool. My pick is actually Rogue for stand-up player. Simi kind of said it just there, like Rogue best captain. She was raving on about it all week, but I think a big part of obviously a team is a collection of 5 people, but at the end of the day, the captain is really the one leading the charge, and obviously he was a big part of kind of recognizing the skill sets of the team, what adjustments they needed to make, how they need to play the game, and then having the experience and the discipline to kind of lead them in the games and kind of stick to their strategy. You know what I mean? I also distinctly remember I remember versing Orcas in the round robin, and then Fuggan and I were trying to attack the green front and or right and or B door. And it was basically like Rogue was on like that little panel that kind of the door defense were usually on, and then Fuggan just had to the way we got in the base was Fuggan just needed to win the duel against that person, and we would get in the base. And I was sitting there, I was like, all right, cool. And then I'd go, and then they're like Rogue's won his duel. I'm like, okay, I just have to wait 8 seconds. And then I go, okay, Rogue's won another duel. Okay, this is getting real painful. I've been sitting in this position for like 30 seconds waiting for someone to win a duel. So I distinctly remember that. So that's why Rogue gets my my pick for stand-up player. Have we got any last bits we would like to say about the WA Orcas before we move on?
Go for us.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can agree with that. Yeah, Rogue was definitely up there with being a pain, but in a good way.
Yeah. I just think it's going to be. Only last thing will be just. I am like so many of the WA team. I am just interested in what they're going to do next year.
Yeah.
And probably more importantly than what they're going to do next year, what are they going to do between now and next year?
Yeah, for sure. Post-tournament is the best time to upskill your game, guys. Get around that.
Family-friendly channel, but if you want to play a drinking game, every time Holmes has said.
True. We'd be sinking a few, or every time I have a technical difficulty on the stream. Jeez. Anyway.
Red cordial shot.
Red cordial. Cool. Well,
That's our next team.
To WA Orcas. The last team, 21st place. We have New Zealand Dysfunctional. We had Sheru, Rogue New Zealand, Guerrero, Lycan, and I.
Oh, who's that scrub?
Who is that? Fries, tell us about your team's journey and what you did well and what you didn't do well.
Well, as you can see on the stats there, we just decided to treat the competition like a slide and just go down.
You're supposed to go. Yeah.
So it was a bit janky. like myself and Lycan were kind of put onto the team last-ish minute. But of course, I do shift work and I live quite far away from the site, so I didn't really make much training. I'm not trying to use it as an excuse because, I still could have put in the effort, but just at the end of the shift, I'm just like, ugh. But yeah, like in, I think a day before the competition, dislocated a knee.
Oh
So,
my goodness
and
gracious
then,
me.
yeah, flying in, we had Rogue NZ and Hatman from Cobra's real crook as well. So we're pretty much scuffed from the start, but we did
You
with.
started the strongest.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
I think everyone was just like, "Oh, we're just so tired." But yeah, no, the journey towards it was, yeah, like I'll admit, I dropped the ball a little bit, and I could have made more trainings, but yeah. But in terms of the training that I did make in the month leading up to it, I'm quite hard on myself, so I knew that I wasn't doing as well as I should be. Um, but I was just trying to, make sure that everyone else was doing their part and doing well and stuff like that. And Cherry especially was putting a lot of pressure on herself because she was our captain this year. And like I said to the team before we came over, and I was like, look, if someone makes a call, we'll just stick with it, and then we can just debrief later and everything like that. And for the most part, everyone, things were working, and then all of a sudden the things that were working weren't working anymore. So we'd have to try and switch it up, and then when we switched it up, it would start working, and then again it wouldn't. So I think it might have just come down to a little bit of experience there, a lack of training on my part, and just, yeah, everyone just eventually being a bit run down because we were a team of 5. Again, not trying to make excuses, but that's kind of what it sounds like. Also, someone needs to tell Rogue NZ to get an original name. But yeah, no, I'm not even going to try and pronounce Cody's alias because I don't think anybody could, and for some reason I feel like I don't think he could pronounce it either.
Guerrero.
Guerrero, I don't know.
Guerrero.
But yeah, he was our newest player, and he's still a young fella. He's 15, I think he is. But he's really good with the pack on pack skills, like the dueling and stuff like that. But when it comes to just bigger picture awareness, that's something that he's like, I've already talked to him about after the comp, and he's real keen on working on, which is really awesome to see. As for Lycan, she was telling me before, she's like, hey, I was last line, I know I'm heavy, call me the anchor. So I was just like, all right, bro. You stick with that. And on the last day that we played, it was myself and Rogue NZ. We went out and we just weren't getting into the groove, and it just shows. It was unfortunate. I'm pretty gutted about it, but overall I'm really happy with the way that we performed. Obviously we could have done better, but with what we had for how much we trained together, we used the cards that we were dealt with, and we did what we could.
I didn't realize. Is it Sheru or Cheru? How do you say it?
Cheru, I think it's Cheru. I'm probably gonna need a slap if I'm wrong, but
I didn't realize she was. You say she was the captain of the team?
Yeah, she was our captain. Yeah.
Was she in-game captain as well?
I think there was shared responsibility, like we were talking about before, and like especially on attack, I kind of would make bounce calls or stuff like that. If we were struggling at one base, I'd be like, okay, sweet, let's go. Or if I noticed that my attacking partner or myself we're having a rough time, I'd make the call to switch or something like that. But Rogue and Cheru were kind of making like the game strategy plans, and then Lycan was making the calls from defense as well, because in her words, she was like, I'm not moving, I'm not running. So yeah. So it was kind of a shared responsibility, and of course with Guerrero, he was just obviously being his first match and first competition. Um, yeah, we kind of didn't want to put any of the pressure on him, but if he was to make a call, we'd be like, "Yep, sweet, we'll follow it, man." But yeah, he was just like he was more. I think he was more wanting to be told what to do.
I'm
But
very
yeah,
much
So-
the same.
yeah, I'm the same. I like to be told what to do rather than make a call. But I was just like,
Fetch.
I'll do it. Okay.
And look, it's a big thing, obviously, because there are players who get forced into calling when they would much rather just be a power player, a pack hitter, and things like
Yeah.
that. And as a new player, you're not necessarily sure what that is. So kudos to the team, to you guys for being fairly open with that, because that's an experience that a lot of new players don't get. Because a lot of new players just get shoved into the corner, so to speak, and basically go just follow.
Yeah.
So, I think if that was something you guys did as a team, that's really cool. And time will tell, but what Cody might have got out of that might be a lot more than perhaps other teams as new players who kind of just get sort of not necessarily sidelined, but they don't get given the chance to for their first couple of nationals. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not even blinders for the younger players. It's blinders for the older players and the captains and things. They go, "Oh, that's a new player. Don't listen to them," right? They don't know what they're talking about. And yeah, so kudos to that. I just want to point out though, like statistically speaking, you look at these scores, and one things we haven't talked about is like your the base stats and things for these teams. They do vary. Obviously, there's some good consistency here. But your average scores. So basically, the average scores are just good. Like they are. It's as simple as that. So something not to be dismissed. That even though bases, you've got a couple of you getting consistently and a couple of you not. That's fine. But like the amount of trigger pulling you guys did compared to some of the teams below you guys, is just that much more, and they're on target. There's something to be said about that.
No, I do appreciate it, and like I said before, it just came down to the fact that things that were working ended up not working on a different day, or something like that. And I think for me especially, I struggled to try and think of a workaround, and I try and put it to the team, be like, okay, you guys, what do you think we should do? And Lycan especially was kind of like the voice on my shoulder, like, because Lycan actually, along with Dark Passion, who is a Queensland player now, they taught me how to play. And so for when I was struggling, I would always turn to Lycan and be like, hey man, like, what do you reckon I should do? And she'd offer her advice to me, and then I'd put it to the team and be like, hey guys, what do you think of this or this? The fact that we were all staying at separate accommodations, I was staying with Lycan, and then the other three were together with the Cobras. The fact that they were all still keen to meet up and chat about stuff going on, and we'd all, still get along really well together outside of the maze, as well as play together pretty well as well. I found that it was quite easy just to slot into. I know that Rogue NZ's been playing for longer than I have been, as far as I know, and with Cher kind of just beginning to get her competitive swing going now. I was quite happy with the fact that they just welcomed me into the team and was just like, okay, let's do this kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, to put the pressure on, Four Eyes, who's your standout player for the team?
Cheru, for sure. Not taking anything away from anybody else. Like, we all did what we could with what we had. But yeah, Cheru, she just hunkered down and did it. Like, she made calls, and she just took on the role really well, and she was very open to criticism. She was also real humble about everything as well. Like, if she had a great game, she wouldn't gloat about it and say like, oh, we did this, like, let's do it again because I did well. It was it was really cool to see. And I was like, I'd play again on a team with her in a heartbeat. Like, it's really awesome to have, especially her being very, very small. She's one of those people that you just walk around a corner and you have to adjust your height down. But she was one of those people that was just real sneaky and just, yeah. If you get an opportunity to have a crack at playing with her, like, she's real open to learning as well. And then all that, I could talk about it for ages about the team in general, but like, yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah. Nico, what about you, man?
Look, I'm going to echo that, but I want a call out in just a second. But yeah, Chero for like first time captaining, I believe. Did you say
Yeah.
4 hours?
Yep.
That's not easy. It's not easy, and Lance put it in the chat. It's not easy when you have a split team across accommodations, and you've got a 5-person team. You cannot afford for people to get sick, and people are going to get worn down by the end of it. And especially with what you just described as how you guys started before the competition even got underway. That's huge. I don't wish captaining on anybody. I love it. There's a sick part of me that loves it, but it's a thankless job. It's like goalkeeping, because at the end of the day, one mistake at the end of it rests with you. And kudos, and also keeping a very, very respectable average score there, and getting bases every game. So absolutely kudos to that. Sorry, Lance is just commenting on the fact that he took me to a win. He did. It was a good team. We did well. Thankless job though. But for the chat, massive shout out to a very clear last line defender and the bing bong that was our beautiful Lycan. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. There you go. Chat, are you happy?
What is the New Zealand landscape looking like going into Albury Nats 4 Eyes in terms of teams and stuff?
Well, everyone's sort of just starting to get back into the groove now. I've finally left my department of shift work, so I'm moving into back to Monday to Friday. So I'm really going to put the hammer down and just try and get back up to speed, and attend more trainings for myself. But because I've been away from the scene for quite a while, I'm not too sure in terms of numbers what it's going to look like. But I'm hoping that we can send a couple Auckland teams again, and then obviously we got our South Island teams, Dunedin, coming in, which will be talked about in the next stream. Yeah, so in terms of the South Island scene, they're doing really well from what I know. But yeah, everyone's just sort of getting up to speed back up here in Auckland at the moment. So I'm hoping things can just keep going forward, and yeah,
cool. Well, New Zealand is another one of the scenes that got hit pretty hard by COVID, but it looks like you're starting to get back on your feet, and it's really exciting again to see players like Jerry and Guerrero, first year players, doing so well. It's they're with some more training, the experiences they gain after their first Nats. I'm sure they're going to be, if they come back, they're going to be they're going to be impressing us even more. I always say the difference between a player before and after their first Nats is like night and day. I think that's when you see
100%.
the biggest leap in just everything really is right after their first nationals, right? So,
and I'll just cut in on there. I'm sorry, but yeah, with Guerrero, from the day he arrived and we had our first training session as a team together at Nats, and then the performance on the last day is, again, like you said, night and day. It was all getting really good, and yeah. So I'm hoping he sticks with it, and he's told me he's going to stick with it. So yeah, next year hopefully we'll see him back.
You better. We don't want anyone quitting. All right. Any last things about dysfunctional before we wrap up the show, guys?
Yeah, just thanks
I
to them
feel
again. Sorry, man.
nah,
Audio
no,
delay.
you got it's your team. I just wanted to have a crack at the end, saying you need to change your name because, quite frankly, you're one of the most functional teams out there. Liars.
Yeah, I'm honestly looking forward to seeing what's happening with the teams next year. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, thanks to the team again for just kind of taking me on board, even though I wasn't there for much of the year, and just having a good time, really. And yeah, it was great, Nat. It's great to see everyone, and yeah, it's cool.
No worries. Well, I can stop sharing my screen because that's the last of the. Oh, look, your faces are real big. Hello, hello. Getting delusional. It's getting late, but no. Well, that's the bottom 10 wrapped up. Thank you very much, Four Eyes and Nickel, for joining me. Very insightful insights. Can't think of a better way to say that. Not right now, anyway. Yeah, it's been a blast.
I have one more because I promised someone the 289 percentage tag ratio
Oh,
because
who
it was
it?
this guy down here. He got it. Four Eyes
got
got
It's me.
a
So on the
289.
stream,
Yeah.
he is there.
Oh,
Oh, wow. Just
that's not confusing at all. I have like all of us, but yeah, sorry. I promised I would say it, but Four Eyes a 289, but instead of getting a 26 to 9, he had 55 to 19.
oh wow. Oh, cool.
So
That's
well
impressive.
done, sir.
Oh man. Oh, okay.
You're not as
Sweet.
washed up as you think, Mike. Come on. Imagine this guy with
Oh.
some good year training under his belt. Huh?
I know, right?
Oh.
Terrifying.
Doubles champ.
I hope to.
Doubles champ making a comeback.
Oh, the dream. Just got to oil the knees.
Oh, even I'm getting.
Don't
a
put
bit
them both
like
on the
that
ground.
now.
Oh man, it was such a Gumby term. I just was kneeling and I turned around and I was like, "Oh, I'm getting old. I better put my other knee down." And then I turned around and Jet's standing there like, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
Nice work. Nice work. Well, yeah, I think I had something I wanted to say. Cool. Yes,
Sorry.
this is the first of our ZLTAC cross LSA collaboration things. So I just want to say a big thank you to them for being open to this collaboration. I think at the end of the day, both of the groups or organization, whatever you want to call it, a main goal and objective is improving or like keeping on growing the laser sports scene. We're doing it in different ways, focusing on different things. But I think at the end of the day, when we've got two groups who have unified goals, it makes perfect sense to collaborate and work together. So obviously this is the first of that. We've got the top 10 review streams, but rest assured LSA Laser Sports Academy will be, keeping in touch with the ZLTAC media team. And yeah, we've had a few I've had a few conversations with Wham Fox, the media director, about, well, at least he was the media director. We'll see if he ends up in the new. I'm sure he will be, because he's just absolutely, definitely the man for the job. Well, we've had a bit of a yarn, shouted out some ideas. I won't say anything yet. I'll keep that under wraps. But rest assured, lots of exciting stuff coming in the future. And yeah, cool. That's all I have to say.
I'm going to jump in one more time. Sorry. Anyone want to jam prenats? Hit me up. I'm keen to play. Let's do this. Sweet.
Which prenats?
That's all. Any. I'm keen.
All right.
Look, we're close. We might end up having a few teams going to pre-nets. We've got 2 for this one, so who knows?
Yeah.
Sick.
Cool. Alrighty, guys. I'm calling it. Actually, before we finish, I want, without looking at the time, if you have already, then just forget about it. I want you to guess how long we were streaming for before we wrap up. Shout out a number.
It's right in front of me. It's on front of my screen.
All right, in front of your screen. Four Eyes. You got a guess?
Sorry, bonus kitty. I'm gonna guess 3 hours.
Yep. Simi guessed just under 3 hours. Lowlance guessed 2 hours 45 minutes. We clocked in at 3 hours and 13 minutes. So that's the longest LSA stream thus far.
Oops.
But obviously, no, well, you guys, I think it speaks to you guys had a lot of very insightful things to say. And hopefully, the players and the teams that were listening find some value out of it. That's the ultimate goal. I mean, I have personally for hosting these streams is to provide, tell a bit of the story about the team, but also hopefully give everyone watching some direction on what they can do leading into next nationals to keep getting better, because that's my jam, getting people better at laser tag. So anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen. Salute. I'll see you later, and I won't bugger up this transition to the offline screen. Goodbye.